What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 2KN Chapter 26 Slave Ship, Don Quixote's Slave Industry, Update 2. The sky is blue and clear, the white clouds are like cotton candy. The golden afterglow of the sunset falls on the calm sea, sparkling, and the sea surface reflects the dazzling golden light like a mirror. It seems that the whole sea is covered with gold. It is getting close to dusk. Wow, a brand new medium-sized warship sailed from the distant sea. It pushed aside the calm sea surface, raising ripples and waves. The sea breeze blew gently, rolling up the high-hanging flag of justice, fluttering in the wind. On the deck of the warship, since leaving Mushroom Town, Lu En has taken out his exclusive rocking chair as usual, put on sunglasses, and lay on the rocking chair. There is also a small wooden table next to it, with the same old desserts and drinks. It has been about an hour since leaving Mushroom Town. The warship is traveling at a constant speed, heading towards the eastern waters of Mushroom Town, about 260 kilometers away from Pinglu Island. According to the current speed of the warship, it will arrive at Pinglu Island in the early morning. Lu En did not ask too much about this. For him, this time, going out to sea, carrying out the first mission since joining the Marine, is equivalent to an ordinary slacking action. Lu En just treats it as a trip. As for the task summary report at that time, he only needs to throw it to the adjutant Bart to be responsible for it. Even the time of writing the report is saved. It has to be said. In order to slack off, Lu En can be said to be painstaking. Lying on the rocking chair, Lu En looked through the sunglasses at the Marine recruits who were in training on the spacious warship deck not far away. This group of Marine recruits seemed very excited for the first time to go out to sea to perform a mission. Even the training was extremely hard, and there was no place to release their passion. The helmsman, navigator, lookout, and cook each performed their duties. Adjutant Bart was responsible for coordinating the main sailing routes of the warship and all matters big and small on the warship. In general, Lu En, the Marine colonel, was equivalent to a hands-off shopkeeper. Throwing all the troubles to his subordinates, he had a chance to relax for half a day. Report. At this moment, the lookout on the wooden tower of the warship said, Colonel Lu En, 5 miles south of our warship, a pirate ship is engaging in a large-scale exchange of fire with a tourist ship. Hearing this, Lu En took a sip of the sweet and delicious drink and responded calmly, Don't worry about it. Continue to sail according to the original route. Beside him, Bart looked a little tangled and hesitant. He couldn't help but speak after all. Colonel Lu En, isn't it a bad idea to do this? As Marines, we can't just stand by and watch when encountering such a vicious incident as a pirate ship attacking a tourist ship. If this is seen by outsiders, I'm afraid it will seriously damage the reputation of our Marines. The Marines around him looked over, their eyes full of expectation. Seeing this, Lu En rolled his eyes and gave Bart a thumbs up. You are so noble, you are amazing. They all love you. I am just a Marine colonel. I just want to lie down and slack off at work. What's wrong with me? Listen to my advice. You, a small major, can't control this kind of thing. After listening, Bart hesitated and stammered. Colonel, there are very few passengers on the tourist ship that is being attacked by the pirate ship. They seem to have discovered us. They are holding flags and asking for help from us. The lookout sent intelligence again. You are wrong. They may be greeting us. Don't worry about them. Lu En said bluntly. Lookout. Bart. A group of Marines. Now, the tourist ship is almost completely covered by the gunfire of the pirate ship. Moreover, the passengers on the ship are being attacked crazily by the pirates and are screaming in despair. So, how did you see it? The passengers on these tourist boats, do they still have time to greet our Marines? Even if you are lying, you should at least find a suitable excuse. It's outrageous. At this moment, the lookout who continued to observe the battle situation in the sea had sent a message to Lu En. Colonel Lu En, this seems to be a slave ship. They are arresting passengers on the tourist boats. I seem to have seen that there are many children imprisoned on this slave ship. This is a slave ship that specializes in capturing slaves. It's not just a pirate ship. The reason they attacked the tourist ship was not just for money like other pirate groups. Their behavior was even worse, and it was obvious that they wanted to capture the passengers on the tourist ship as slaves. These words immediately aroused the bloodiness and anger in the hearts of all the Marines on the entire warship. Slave ship? Come closer and take a closer look. Lu En was still lying on the chair, and there was not much emotional change on his face. Slacking off is fishing, being lazy is being lazy. But, since some things have already happened, they still have to be taken care of. Unless it's time to get off work, in the final analysis. Lu En is still receiving a salary from Marine. As a Marine colonel, his salary is not low. With the salary issued by Marine, it is harmless to slack off occasionally and be lazy. But during working hours, if you encounter some extremely bad incidents, Lu En can no longer stand idly by. Yes. The helmsman responded quickly. Then, he immediately controlled the rudder and approached the direction of the exchange of fire between the pirate ship and the tourist ship. As the distance between the two sides got closer and closer. At this time, there was no need for the lookout to report the situation. All the Marines on the warship could clearly see the miserable appearance of the attacked tourist ship. In addition, the group of pirates were constantly arresting passengers on the tourist ship, and also put bracelets and anklets on the passengers, and forcibly detained them in the warehouse of the pirate ship as slaves and commodities. Among them, there were children and women. Moreover, after close observation, a group of Marines also found that most of the slaves detained in the warehouse of the pirate ship were underage children. This made Bart and other Marines deeply angry. They clenched their fists tightly, burning with anger, and stared at the group of rampant pirates on the slave ship. Colonel Lu En, I roughly know their identities and origins. Bart took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. From the clues he had at present, he made an ambiguous guess. But he was sure. The truth is probably close to what he thought. Tell me about it. Lu En wanted to know more. They are slave ships under the command of Don Quixote family. Behind them, they also control a huge slave trade industry. They capture a large number of slaves from North Blue and send them to Grand Line to sell them as commodities to nobles at high prices. I have encountered similar incidents several times in North Blue over the years. Among the many industries of Don Quixote family in North Blue, the slave trade business is definitely the largest source of income for Don Quixote family. It is even more than the casino opened by Don Quixote family in North Blue. Bart said indignantly. Don Quixote family again? Why are they so haunting? There are shadows of them everywhere. Lu En raised his eyebrows slightly. The business of Don Quixote family is probably all over the world. Even Grand Line has many underground industries of Don Quixote family everywhere. It seems so. It's no wonder that in the dark world, the Don Quixote family has always been extremely famous. Basically, all the forces in the dark world have certain business dealings with the Don Quixote family. Among them, including the Vinsmoke family, the king of North Blue. Also including the 4 emperors pirates far away in the New World. In terms of connections alone, the Don Quixote family is one of the best in the world. Even the celestial dragons, who are known as the world's nobles, can barely get in touch with them with the identity that Doflamingo, the young master of the Don Quixote family, once had. Colonel, I apply to lead the people in person to capture and detain all these hateful human traffickers. Seeing the passengers on the tourist boat being captured as slaves by the pirates of the slave ship, Bart was anxious and turned around and took the initiative to apply to Lu En with a serious face. In response, Lu En did not give an accurate response. Instead, he slowly put down the drink in his hand and asked Bart a question that had nothing to do with what was happening at the moment. What time is it now? Chapter 27. 1 Flat Attack. Split the Sea. 3 updates. At the same time, on the deck of the tourist ship, which was completely covered by artillery fire, passengers looked pale, screaming loudly with fear and despair. One by one, vicious pirates boarded the tourist ship and arrested passengers, handcuffing them with ancient prisoner handcuffs and handcuffing their necks tightly. Women and children were also handcuffed as slaves. The scene was very tragic. The security staff of the tourist ship were beaten down without any ability to fight back. Some were so scared that they were paralyzed on the ground and trembling and surrendered. In short, the attack of this slave ship on the tourist ship may take less than 10 minutes, and the tourist ship has been completely defeated. Be careful, lousy, these are all high-quality goods. Any bumps will seriously affect the auction price of these goods. The leader of the slave ship was a middle-aged man with a big belly, biting a cigar in his mouth. He was short, only about 1.5 meters tall, wearing a suit like a Western godfather, and carrying 2 revolvers on his waist. At this moment, he was commanding the pirates on the slave ship to capture the passengers on the tourist boat. In his opinion, all these passengers were auctionable goods, so they naturally couldn't be allowed to bump, which would cause the price of the goods to plummet. Brother, Marine is here. At this time, several pirates ran over with a nervous look on their faces. Marine? The middle-aged man, August, raised his eyebrows. His eyes were a little solemn. He turned around slowly, and across the sea not far away, he clearly saw a warship coming, approaching their position. Have you found out which marine branch this warship belongs to? How many Marines are there on the warship? August asked. Brother, after checking, the number of this warship belongs to the Marine branch of Mushroom Town. There are about 40 to 50 Marines on the warship. Several pirates truthfully stated their inferences based on the clues they had obtained so far. Marine from the Marine branch of Mushroom Town. There are only 40 or 50 of them. August's mouth curled up, revealing a disdainful expression. If there were 200 or 300 Marines, I might be a little bit afraid. However, 40 or 50 Marines can't pose much threat to us. Don't worry about them. As long as we don't take the initiative to attack the Marines, they won't dare to easily intervene in our actions. If they don't know what's good for them and want to rescue the slaves we captured, then we don't have to be polite to them. When the time comes, just sink their entire warship in this sea area. As long as we kill all these Marines, who will know it was us who did it? Even if the Marines are angry, it won't affect our business industry. So, under August's order, this group of pirates captured passengers as slaves more and more rampantly, and didn't take the warship that was already sailing and docked in the sea area next to them seriously. For a while, the whole tourist ship was full of screams. The passengers who resisted stubbornly were beaten mercilessly until they lost the ability to resist and were dragged into the warehouse by the pirates like dead dogs. Women and girls were pale and terrified and dared not resist, accompanied by the heartbreaking cries of children. The scene was in chaos. On the other side, warship, on the deck. Hearing Lu En's question, Bart was stunned for a moment, and then he responded subconsciously. The current time is 10 minutes away from 6 o'clock in the evening. Is that so? Lu En slowly stood up from the sun lounger. Without taking off his sunglasses, he walked step by step to the front of the warship deck. Under the shining golden sunset, his back was revealed to the eyes of all the Marines present. Lend me your knife. Lu En looked at Bart. Yes. Bart was stunned for a moment, and then, with excitement, and expectation on his face, he hurriedly handed the saber he carried on his waist to the former carefully. After receiving the well-made samurai sword handed by Bart, Lu En weighed it casually. It was very light, and the weight was not suitable for someone like him who had the strongest physique in the world. But it was barely okay. Lu En, holding the samurai sword, looked at the slave ship that held countless slaves. Looking at the group of rampant pirates, even in the face of Marine, they still unscrupulously captured the passengers on the tourist ship. Obviously, this group of pirates didn't take the Marines seriously at all. When they noticed Lu En's action, not only was Bart excited and expectant, but the group of Marines with justice also looked up at Lu En's tall back with expectation. Colonel Lu En, are you going to do it yourself? Recalling the Tao force tester that was blown up by Lu En's punch in the training ground, this group of Marines looked forward to the scene where Lu En personally took action to solve this group of rampant pirates. Holding an ordinary samurai sword, Lu En gently raised his right arm, holding the handle of the samurai sword with one hand. No extra movements. Just aiming the samurai sword in his hand at the slave ship in front and swinging it down. It seemed light, like he was playing a joke. Ito Ryu Dachin Shiji 108 Troubles Win Shishigej. Ah, it seems I've walked into the wrong set. I didn't fuse Zoro's, moves King, swordsmanship. I fused Haki, Ryoma, and Odin's swordsmanship. So, Lu En seemed to have just remembered that when he performed swordsmanship, he didn't need to shout out a series of bluff-sounding swordsmanship moves like Zoro. Ito Ryu Ping A. Lu En held the samurai sword and swung it down casually. Instant. Swoosh. The sharp blade of the samurai sword, which gathered the mighty sword energy, was fully released by Lu En at the slave ship in front of him in an instant. The sharp sword energy rushed into the sky. It was like a tidal wave. It was earth-shaking. The terrifying sword energy turned into a flying slash, and the azure slash was about to cut through the void, and the space was forcibly divided, twisted, and squirmed. Buzz. Buzz. Affected by the aftermath of this sharp sword energy, the surrounding space was shaking and trembling slightly, as if the void was about to break apart. The brilliant azure flying slash cut through the sky, and at the same time, it exploded with a sharp sound of breaking through the air, as if a loud roar resounded through the sky, deafening. Hualala, the extremely dazzling azure slash flew towards the slave ship, and wherever it passed, even the calm sea surface was forcibly divided and split, causing waves of rolling waves, and the seawater was upside down hundreds of meters above the sky. Just the aftermath of this azure slash was enough to directly split the sea surface into a hideous and terrifying crack and abyss. On both sides of the split sea surface, two huge waves were also raised, rolling wantonly in the air. The scene seemed extremely shocking. These scenes made Bart and other Marines marvel and look shocked. The dazzling azure light made them half close their eyes, and their eyeballs felt a little painful. From this slash, they felt an incomparable terrifying force. It was enough to split everything in the world. It was a shocking slash that could destroy the world. Even the hardest objects in the world could not withstand the power of this shocking slash. So strong, is Colonel Lu En's swordsmanship so terrifying? Bart was stunned, his mind was shocked. All the Marines also looked up at Lu En's back with shock on their faces. Finally Lu En's casual slash, just a flat attack, split the sea forcefully and hit the slave ship from the front. Boom, accompanied by a shocking sound, like thunder in the ears, resounding through the sky. This fierce slash from Lu En's hand forcibly split the slave ship in the middle in an instant. Crack. Snap. The whole process was like chopping melons and vegetables, just like using the sharpest blade in the world to cut tofu, and the entire slave ship was split in half without any hindrance. The middle of the slave ship that was split in half left only an extremely smooth cutting mark. As smooth as a mirror. Chapter 28 Haki. Haki is called Little Lu En in North Blue, 4th update. After the azure blue slash split the slave ship, the light that burst out was still extremely dazzling and shining, and it was even more eye-catching under the setting sun in the evening, and continued to cross the distant sea. Boom. The flying slash penetrated the sea thousands of meters away, forcibly split the sea into a crack of 10,000 meters, and then slowly disappeared. The remaining sword energy aftermath still deeply affected this sea area. The shocking waves raised by the impact of the aftermath fell from the sky like a downpour. Crash. The sea current surged, and the seawater fell. I saw. The slave ship carrying about 100 pirates has now been forcibly split in the middle and split into two halves. Then, a large amount of seawater began to pour into the slave ship, completely soaking the slave ship that was split in half, and gradually tilted to both sides, ready to sink into the sea at any time. Some unfortunate pirates were hit by the shocking slash from the front and split in half on the spot. Their bodies were almost cold. The deck of the entire slave ship was scattered with bloody red blood, and the strong smell of blood mixed with the smell of seawater filled the air. Just this ordinary flat attack killed dozens of pirates in an instant. Even the aftermath of the slash crushed the bodies of many pirates. In just a short encounter, the slave ship suffered heavy losses, and there were screams and wails full of pain everywhere. All the pirates who were capturing tourists on the tourist boat stopped their current actions one after another, looking back with horror on their faces, looking at the slave ship that had been split in half. The deep fear in their hearts surged into their hearts, making their faces pale and their bodies tremble uncontrollably. What happened? What just happened? The whole ship was split in half. How could there be such a great swordsman among those Marines? Panic spread. It is well known that a swordsman who can slash through the air can definitely enter the ranks of great swordsmen. And looking at this sea, there are not many great swordsmen. I never thought. Today, here, they happened to run into a great swordsman among the Marines. Run! Many pirates screamed in panic, stopped their current actions, abandoned the captured slaves, and wanted to jump into the sea to escape, which was a dead end. Are we saved? There is an extremely terrifying super strong man among these Marines. He split the slave ship with just one sword and saved us. Woo woo woo, I thought I was going to become a slave at the disposal of the pirates. It was a great man from the Marine who saved us. The rescued passengers cried loudly, venting their inner fear. At the same time, on the left deck of the slave ship. As the person in charge of the slave ship, Agu was standing on the left slave ship with his eyes wide open, feeling the large amount of seawater pouring into this half of the slave ship, which was about to sink into the sea at any time. He was completely confused. This is. Turning his eyes, Agu looked at the other half of the slave ship that was split, and a large pile of scarlet bloodline thrown on the ship, as well as many crushed limbs, flesh and corpses of pirates. These scenes were extremely shocking. What made Agu feel terrified and shocked was naturally not these crushed limbs and flesh, but the terrifying existence that just issued that shocking slash. How can it be so strong? How can there be a monster with such a terrifying swordsmanship level in the Marine branch of Mushroom Town? Why has the intelligence collected in the past never shown such news? Agu lost his voice one after another and completely lost his composure. He couldn't imagine it. Forget about the Marine branch in Mushroom Town. How could a place like North Blue have such a great swordsman with such terrible swordsmanship? Shouldn't a great swordsman of this level appear in Grand Line? How could he appear in North Blue? With such a high level of swordsmanship, why don't you go to Grand Line to show off your power and power, but stay in a small North Blue to be the king? Is this reasonable? It doesn't make sense at all. Swordsmanship of this level. I seem to see the world's #1 swordsman Haki. August had once witnessed the scene of Haki of the 7 warlords of the sea taking action. Therefore, from the terrifying sense of oppression brought by the shocking slash just now, he seemed to vaguely feel the scene of watching Haki, the world's #1 swordsman, from afar. What is this concept? He really couldn't imagine it. Could it be that there is a terrifying monster on this marine warship whose swordsmanship level can be compared with that of Haki, the world's #1 swordsman? Gurgle, August couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Hey, that's Haki, the world's #1 swordsman. How could a small Mushroom Town marine branch have a swordsman of the same level as Haki? I must be crazy to have such a ridiculous idea. Even if this person's swordsmanship is not as good as Haki's. But based on the amazing slash he just released, this person is definitely a world-class swordsman. Perhaps, only by letting the young master take action can we be sure to take this person down. The more Agu thought about it, the more frightened he became. Who is his young master? That's Doflamingo, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. In the small North Blue Marine branch, there is a monster of this level. It turns out that only the young master can take down the opponent in person? It's unbelievable. In Agu's opinion, the North Blue Marine branch has a monster of this level, which is like cheating. As the slave ship that was split in half was about to sink into the sea, Agu didn't care about the shock in his heart, and hurriedly ordered his men to move their positions immediately and go to the already damaged tourist ship. Even if the tourist ship is damaged, it is better than this slave ship that is about to sink into the sea. Brother, what should we do? One pirate after another walked up to August, and asked in a terrified, nervous, and uneasy manner, can we really deal with a monster of this level? Hearing this, August's heart sank. Of course he knew. Facing a monster of this level, they all had basically no chance of winning even if they all attacked together. Now he could only do nothing. On the other side, witnessing the scene of Lu En splitting the sea with a knife and instantly cutting off a slave ship, Bart and his marines woke up belatedly. They all expressed their strong shock and admiration in their hearts. Is this the level of Colonel Lu En's swordsmanship? So strong, absurdly strong. Did you see it? Just now, Colonel Lu En's swordsmanship even split the sea directly. What level of swordsmanship is this? Even the world's #1 swordsman Haki is only this good at most, right? Don't exaggerate. We must see truth from facts and not exaggerate too much. As for the world's #1 swordsman Haki you just mentioned, in fact, in our North Blue, Haki has a nickname called Little Luen. So, do you understand the value of Colonel Luen? Listening to the increasingly outrageous remarks around him, Bart took a deep breath, forced himself to suppress the shock in his heart, and hurriedly trotted to Luen's side. He looked at the group of screaming pirates and couldn't help but suggest, "Colonel Luen, let us deal with it next. The remaining few crooked melons and cracked dates can't stop our attack at all." "Well, then the rest is up to you," Luen nodded. Just right. Now it was almost time to get off work. He could just be lazy and do some fishing. Chapter 29 The Deterrent Power from Luen. End. 5th update. 3K big chapter please give me flowers. Before Bart was about to lead the Marines to take action, Luen couldn't help but look to the other side. The slave ship that he had split in half was about to sink into the sea. The slaves imprisoned in the slave ship warehouse had obviously not been rescued yet. We can't let these slaves sink into the sea with the slave ship. Wouldn't it be a waste of his efforts? So, he first dispatched a team of 10 people, most of whom were made up of Marine recruits. Marine recruits have not undergone years of hard training, and most of them do not have strong combat power. Let them deal with those vicious pirates. I'm afraid there will be a lot of casualties, but if they are asked to rescue the slaves imprisoned in the slave ship warehouse, it is obviously easy. A team of 10 people composed of 10 Marine recruits, all the remaining Marine elites, were handed over to Bart to lead, to capture the group of pirates who were about to flee in a hurry. Maybe in terms of numbers, Marine is not as good as that group of pirates. There is a slight difference in the number of people, but the gap is not too big. In addition, because of Luen's slash that split the sea just now, the entire slave ship was cut off, dozens of pirates were killed in seconds, and the surviving pirates were all scared. No doubt. The combat effectiveness of this group of pirates is definitely less than half of its peak period. In addition, although Luen did not want to intervene in the capture operation, he was standing on the warship and personally in charge. Presumably, the group of pirates would not dare to resist stubbornly, and would be captured and imprisoned. Action. With Luen's order, the team composed of 10 Marine recruits immediately went to the 2 slave ships that were about to sink into the sea to rescue the slaves trapped in the warehouse. Among them, most of them were children. Fortunately, although Luen's slash just now was very casual, it did not hit the warehouse of the slave ship, so there was naturally no possibility of accidental injury. In addition to these 10 Marine recruits, all the remaining Marine elites followed the dispatch of Major Bart. It can be seen with the naked eye. A group of about 40 elite Marines led by Bart, with their weapons in hand, rushed towards the pirates who had moved to the tourist boat. About 70 or 80 pirates led by August were attacked fiercely by the Marine led by Bart. The battle broke out. In fact, August had lost control of the pirates at this moment, because Luen's slash was too earth-shattering, it frightened most of the pirates. Now, the pirates don't want to fight with the Marines, but want to escape from this terrible place. So, without any fighting will, the Marine led by Bart naturally defeated the pirates led by August with an absolutely overwhelming advantage, and they were almost powerless to fight back. Even some of the passengers who were captured by the pirates before also participated in the battle with anger, beating the pirates and making them scream. The passengers seemed to want to vent all their anger before. A bunch of trash. Why don't you resist? Seeing the pirates around him falling down one after another and being captured by Marine one after another, August couldn't sit still anymore and roared with anger. Brother, you want us to resist, but the problem is. Don't back down. A group of pirates looked at August who was fighting and retreating speechlessly, and couldn't help complaining. You guys. August's face turned red, and he was furious, but he couldn't refute it. In fact, his strength was not so strong that he had no power to resist. It was purely. The terrifying figure standing on the deck of the warship brought August an unparalleled sense of oppression, making it difficult for him to exert his strength. Even if that terrifying figure did not personally participate in the capture operation, the pressure it brought to August and other pirates has never been reduced. This is also the main reason why August and other pirates have no power to fight back. In the end, Bart led a group of elite Marines and captured all the pirates almost unscathed. Even the leader, Aeug, was captured and imprisoned by Bart himself. Everything happened exactly as Luen had guessed. The pirates who had lost their fighting spirit could not stop the fierce attack of Bart and others. The whole battle lasted less than 20 minutes, and the pirates were defeated and officially ended. With the help of many passengers who bravely vented their anger, Bart led the Marine to a great victory. Without losing any elite Marine, all the pirates were captured. Nearly 40 pirates were killed in the whole process. 35 pirates were captured alive, among them, including August, the person in charge of the slave ship, was also captured alive. In addition, another part of the Marine recruits, the group of Marines dispatched by Luen to rescue the slaves imprisoned in the warehouse of the slave ship, they also completed the task perfectly and rescued all the slaves. And they also sent them safely to the damaged tourist boat and did not bring them back to the warship. So far, the battle ended perfectly. The Marine side did not lose a single soldier. The pirates suffered heavy losses, either killed or captured and imprisoned. This battle was fought beautifully. Of course. In the final analysis, it was because of Lu En's action that the group of extremely rampant pirates' thoughts of resistance were defeated. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Marine to capture these pirates so easily, and it would definitely cost the lives of many Marines. We won. A great victory. I have never fought such a rich battle in my life. Are these pirates really the ones on the slave ship? Why do they feel so weak? Don't think too much. They were simply frightened by the shocking slash of Colonel Lu En just now. Otherwise, with only our limited manpower, we would have to pay a very tragic price to capture all these pirates. Colonel Lu Nyds. The Marines who had just won a great victory all showed excited smiles. At the same time, their words were full of admiration, worship, and awe for Lu En. Colonel Lu En, all the pirates have been captured. All the rebels have been killed on the spot. Bart returned to Lu En covered in blood and reported the battle situation truthfully. Most of the bloodline on his body came from the pirates. As for himself, he was only slightly injured at most, and this minor injury was inadvertently caused by August, the leader of the slave ship, when he was fighting with him just now. After detaining all the captured pirates, send them to the tourist ship. Let the passengers on the tourist ship temporarily guard these pirates. Then, notify the Marine branch in Mushroom Town and ask Karen to send a warship to detain these pirates. As for the slaves captured by the pirates, let them be responsible for handling them. We have other tasks and don't have time to do these tedious things. Lu En gave the order very casually. Understood. Bart nodded solemnly. At this time, a Marine trotted to Lu En and told him the truth. Colonel, the leader of the captured pirates said that he has something important to say to you in person. Something to say to me in person? Lu En was slightly surprised. After thinking about it, he didn't mind listening to what the other party wanted to tell him personally. So, next, he took Bart away from the warship and came to this damaged tourist ship that had been attacked. Just after landing on the tourist ship, the eyes of the passengers who came forward were full of awe, gratitude, and admiration, fixed on Lu En. These passengers knew it very well. It was this seemingly young Marine in front of him who split the sea with an extremely terrifying and powerful fighting power, and even the entire slave ship was cut in half. This caused the group of extremely rampant pirates to be frightened and lose their fighting power. In the end, they were easily captured and imprisoned. If it weren't for this man, the group of extremely vicious pirates would never surrender and would definitely resist stubbornly. At that time, only 40 Marines might not be able to capture this group of pirates. So, facing this level of terrifying strongman, and the other party was their savior who rescued their lifesaver, they were naturally full of gratitude, admiration and respect. Chapter 30 Monster. A 16-year-old monster, Update 1. Stepping onto the damaged tourist boat, Lu En, under the leadership of Major Bart beside him, quickly came to the place where the pirates were imprisoned. There were still many Marines left here to guard against the imprisoned pirates to prevent them from trying to rebel. Although the pirates were wearing bracelets and anklets, which greatly affected their ability to move, but if these pirates suddenly rebel, without any defense, there is still a certain probability that they will create a lot of trouble. Colonel Lu En. Seeing Lu En's figure walking step by step, the Marines who stayed here to guard the pirates showed respectful looks. Who is the person in charge of this slave ship? Lu En glanced at the imprisoned pirates, the total number of which was about 30 to 40. Most of them had certain injuries, their hair was messy, their clothes were torn, and they were covered in blood, making it difficult to see their appearance. It's him. Several Marines pulled out the middle-aged dwarf with a big belly, and their movements were very rude. Marines naturally wouldn't talk about elegance when dealing with pirates. If they didn't beat the other party half to death, it would be considered that the other party was lucky. August, who was pulled out, felt very aggrieved. When he looked up, he saw Lu En close a hand. This terrifying monster in front of him was the culprit that led to their tragic defeat this time. If it weren't for the other party's shocking slash that shattered the courage of all the pirates, would these dozens of Marines in front of him want to take them down? It's impossible. After what happened just now, Lu En became a huge psychological shadow in the hearts of all the pirates, including August. So young. Seeing Lu En's figure and appearance clearly from a close distance caused August to be shocked. So, is this boy in front of him, who looks no more than 16 years old, the culprit that caused their entire slave ship to be wiped out? A boy who is only 16 years old can release such a shocking flying slash just now. A 16-year-old world-class swordsman? Unbelievable. August was shocked. He obviously didn't expect that the monster that split the sea and cut the slave ship in half was just a young 16-year-old boy. What kind of monster is this? August felt his scalp tingling. At the age of 16, he has such an amazing level of swordsmanship. In time, wouldn't he be the second Hawkeye Mahawk? Such a monster would actually choose to hide in a small place like North Blue? Why not go to the Grand Line to catch those big pirates and hide in a small place like North Blue? At the same age, even if you are as strong as Hawkeye, the current world's #1 swordsman, I'm afraid he is far inferior to this monster in front of you. August had such a terrifying thought, which shocked him deeply. But what he didn't know was, even if the limiting condition of same age was put aside, the conjecture in his mind was still correct. So, you are looking for me. What do you want to say to me in person? Lu En looked at August calmly and asked. With Lu En's question, the many distracting thoughts in Agu's mind were finally interrupted. He forced himself to suppress the shock in his heart, raised his head, and looked at Lu En stubbornly. Do you know who we belong to? We are the subordinates of the 7 warlords of the Sea Doflamingo. We are from the Don Quixote family. Do you know what you are doing? You destroyed the industrial chain of the Don Quixote family? The young master will not let you go. Don't tell me that you Marines never knew that there is an industrial chain about slave trading in the Don Quixote family. Even some of you Marines are involved in it. For so many years, this industrial chain of slave trading has never disappeared. That means it is tacitly allowed to exist. And you took the initiative to break it all. Break the rules tacitly allowed by everyone in the sea. After a pause, August continued angrily, even if you are Marines who enforce justice. But once you break some tacit rules of the sea, you will have to pay a painful price. You Marines, are you going to be enemies with the entire Dark World? The reputation of Doflamingo alone naturally cannot scare Marines. Therefore, August directly pulled in the forces of the entire Dark World, trying to use this to oppress Lu En in front of him. Unfortunately, Lu En didn't care about this so-called threat, and even didn't take it seriously at all. Is that all you want to say? Lu En was not interested? I thought the other party had some important information to reveal. I didn't expect that the other party was just trying to point out the interests of the slave trade industry chain. Of course, Lu En knew all this, and there was no need for August to complain here. Seeing Lu En's indifferent attitude, August became more and more frustrated and angry. He blurted out subconsciously. This batch of slaves needs to be sent to New World and provided to the 4 emperors Kaido of the beasts. You are snatching food from the tiger's mouth and provoking the entire beast's pirates. You who are in North Blue will never be able to imagine the horror of the Emperor of New World. Without paying attention to August, who was almost losing his mind, Lu En slowly turned around. Before leaving, he suddenly remembered something. So, he told Bart beside him, by the way, I almost forgot, you go and pry open his mouth later and ask him where he wants to send the captured slaves. See if you can dig out the base camp of the slave trade. Yes. Bart's eyes lit up, he quickly agreed, then. According to Lu En's instructions, Bart worked very hard to ask August about the location of the slave trading base. Soon, August could not bear Bart's questioning and could only confess painfully. On Pinglu Island, all the slaves we captured will be sent to Pinglu Island. Our Don Quixote family cadres are in charge there. The slaves sent to Pinglu Island will be sold in batches to Grand Line and New World. All the slaves captured in North Blue will be sent to Pinglu Island, and then shipped to all parts of the world in batches. Bart was slightly stunned when he learned the truth. Pinglu Island? What a coincidence, isn't that the destination of their trip? He returned to Lu En and told him the news he had just asked. Is the slave trading base established by Don Quixote family in North Blue located on Pinglu Island? Lu En was thoughtful. Coincidence? Or is Drake, the undercover Marine, investigating the slave trading in North Blue? So, Drake appeared on Pinglu Island? This makes sense. Drake is not a real pirate after all. Never mind, it has nothing to do with me anyway. With this idea in mind, Lu En stopped going into a dead end. Originally, it was just to investigate Drake, not to investigate the troublesome matter of slave trading. Lu En would naturally not do anything unnecessary and increase his workload for no reason. So he prepared to take Bart and other Marines off the tourist ship and set sail for Pinglu Island. As for the passengers left on the tourist ship, the rescued slave children, and the imprisoned pirates, how should they deal with them? For this problem, Bart had already followed Lu En's instructions and used the Den Den Mushi to contact Karen at the Marine branch in Mushroom Town, asking the other party to send another warship to come here to clean up the mess. Therefore, the rest of the things no longer require Lu En and others to participate too much. However, just as Lu En was about to leave with Bart and other Marines, from the passengers on the tour boat, a young woman with a slightly embarrassed figure suddenly jumped out, and there seemed to be a servant standing beside her. Obviously, this is a noble. Although the young woman's clothes are disheveled, it can still be seen that the fine material of her clothes and her delicate and tender appearance make her look like a noble girl. She is only about 20 years old, which is the most youthful and beautiful period for women. Although the dress is a little embarrassed because of the pirate's surprise attack just now, it is still difficult to hide the temperament and appearance of this girl. Wait a minute. You can't leave now. The girl stopped Lu En and others who were about to leave the tour boat with a proud face. Chapter 31 My uncle was only a Marine Admiral, Update 2. Hearing the girl's voice of stopping him, Lu En paused slightly. Turning around, he casually glanced at the young girl. He had to admit that the girl was indeed beautiful, graceful, and had an aristocratic temperament. Lu En did not speak. Instead, the girl said with dissatisfaction, "Are you just leaving like this? As Marines, shouldn't you send us safely to the nearby town? At the very least, you should leave a group of Marines to protect our personal safety, right? What if after you leave, while we are waiting for another group of Marines to rescue us, we unfortunately encounter another group of pirates? Then won't we have to sit and wait for death? There's only one way to go? Who can come to save us then?" The girl became more and more angry. I ask you, Send me to a safe town nearby immediately. You must not leave me in this hellhole. This is your Marine's duty, otherwise, I will complain to you, Marine. I forgot to tell you that I am a royal family of the Kingdom of Moss. Moreover, my father is also friends with Colonel Karen of the Marine branch of Mushroom Town. I don't care what kind of mission you need to perform at this moment. In short, you can't just sit back and watch us and let us wait for Marine's rescue here. Your top priority should be to send us to a safe place, instead of performing some shitty mission. What mission can be more important than this? Listening to the arrogant remarks of this beautiful noble girl, even vaguely, she has begun to use moral kidnapping. This made Bart and other Marines frown and look angry. You are so ungrateful. Bart was indignant, all around. The passengers on the tourist boat also cast their eyes. Among them, a few passengers agreed with the noble girl's remarks. Most of them can still distinguish the importance and know that Marine has more important tasks to perform. This time, they just happened to pass by and rescued them, saving them from being captured as slaves by pirates. So, they didn't dare to ask for too much. Besides, they didn't think that their luck would be so bad that they would encounter a second pirate ship again while waiting for Marine to rescue them. Royal family of the Kingdom of Moss? And you have a close relationship with Colonel Karen? Then you are really amazing. At this time, Lu En couldn't help but show a playful smile on his face. I might as well tell you. I solemnly reject your request. The girl was angry. Didn't you hear what I said just now? I am a royal family of the Kingdom of Moss. Aren't you afraid that I will make it difficult for you to move in Marine from now on? At this moment, there are already a few passengers who deeply agree with the girl's remarks and have also spoken in agreement. That's right. Since you have saved us, why don't you be good people and send us to a safe place? Yeah, aren't you Marines? Shouldn't Marines maintain order on the sea and help those in need? Aren't we the ones who need your help now? You can't just abandon us to carry out your mission, right? What a shitty Marine. What a shitty justice. In my opinion, your Marine's duty should be to send us to a safe island first. Then, you can carry out your mission. There was a lot of discussion. Listening to these voices full of moral kidnapping, Lu En couldn't help but laugh. Beside him, Bart was furious. That's enough. Many passengers were intimidated by Bart's momentum. But only the noble girl remained unyielding, not afraid of Bart at all, and her words became more and more sharp. What? You Marines still want to kill us? You didn't work so hard when fighting pirates, so you only bully us nobles and commoners, right? I'm just telling the truth. Don't you Marines have the tolerance to tolerate others? You Marines, aren't you supposed to serve us nobles? Did I say something wrong? I'm asking you to send us to a safe place now. What's wrong with that? Don't I have the power to do that? The girl glared at Bart. She knew it very well. Among so many Marines, the only one who could make the decision was the young Marine. Therefore, she stopped entangled with Bart and fixed her eyes on Lu En again. Either, you just send us to a safe place honestly, or, I will complain to the Marine. You will not be able to move in the Marine in the future. Don't underestimate the influence of our nobles. The girl snorted coldly and raised her proud white neck. Lu En laughed again. I have to tell you with regret that you should not be able to do all you said. Although my uncle is not doing well in the Marine. But after so many years, he has at least got a position as a Marine Admiral. So, I'm actually very curious, what are you going to do to make me unable to move in the Marine? Hearing this, the girl's pretty face froze, and the words stopped abruptly at her lips. Her whole body became extremely stiff, and she was speechless for a while. She didn't dare to be unreasonable to Lu En anymore. The anger that had been pent up in her heart was extinguished by Lu En's words, just like a basin of cold water. She was stunned and stunned. Then, the arrogant attitude on her face was disappearing quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Marine Admiral. This big man standing at the top of the Marine pyramid is not a terrible existence that a small noble like her can try to contend with. Horror, uneasy, shocked, unbelievable. At this moment, countless complex emotions converged in her heart. She obviously never thought that this young Marine in front of her would have such a terrifying background and backstage. At the same time, the passengers who were whispering around were also shocked by Lu En's words. They didn't dare to say anything, and they all lowered their heads and became very obedient. Forget it, don't worry about her. Let's go. Seeing the girl's dumbfounded look, Lu En shook his head. Next, he took Bart and other Marines off the tourist boat and returned to the warship. Soon, the warship set sail again. It went farther and farther, until it completely disappeared in this sea area. Time passed. Day and night alternated. In the blink of an eye, time came to the next day. Early morning. All things revived and were full of vitality. A fiery red sun rose slowly. The sea was blue and boundless. The dazzling golden sunlight was reflected on the sea surface, sparkling, accompanied by a gust of sea breeze blowing gently, rolling up the calm sea surface and raising ripples. North Blue. Pinglu Island, Port Coast. I saw a brand new medium-sized marine warship, flying high with the Marines' Justice flag. Driven by the sea breeze, the warship was sailing from the distant sea and successfully arrived at the port of Pinglu Island. Chapter 32 Arrival. Encounter with Marine Rebel General Drake, Update 3. The warship docked at the coast of Pinglu Island port. Then, Anchored, retracted sails. On the deck of the warship. Marines in marine uniforms were busy doing their own jobs. Among all the busy Marines, there was only one special figure. This figure was lying on a sun lounger, wearing sunglasses, enjoying the warm morning sun. There was also a small wooden table next to him, which was full of desserts and drinks. He looked out of place with the busy Marines around him. Naturally, the only one who could be lazy and slack off openly, and the other Marines on the warship dared not object, was Lu En. After leaving Mushroom Town for one night, we finally arrived at the destination of this trip, Pinglu Island. Although some troubles occurred along the way, they were solved very smoothly. Finally, the warship arrived at Pinglu Island this morning. After a while, Bart walked quickly to Lu En's side, and seeing the latter's lazy and helpless look, he told the truth. Colonel Lu En, we have arrived at Pinglu Island. What should we do next to investigate? Please give me your instructions. After hearing this, Lu En yawned and slowly got up from his chair. He came to the edge of the fence on the warship deck, feeling the cold sea breeze blowing, and looked at the topography of Pinglu Island from the port. Next to him, Bart gave a detailed introduction. Pinglu Island is only 20 kilometers in diameter, half the size of Mushroom Town. But the permanent population is less than 20,000. The floating population is even smaller. This is a not-so-famous and relatively poor island. Even the pirates rarely come to Pinglu Island. It is hard to imagine that Pinglu Island hides the largest slave trading exchange in North Blue. It is the slave trading base built by Don Quixote family. The local residents of Pinglu Island often rush to our Mushroom Town for various trades. Therefore, the economic situation on Pinglu Island is very poor. If it were not for the island's unique black soil, which can grow many crops, I'm afraid that the local residents on Pinglu Island can't support their entire family. Lu En didn't care about what Bart said. Then, Bart continued to talk to himself. Colonel Lu En, what do you think we should do to avoid the Marine Rebel General Drake's detection as much as possible and avoid alerting the enemy? According to the information provided by Colonel Karen before, this rebellious Marine Rear Admiral is very powerful. In North Blue, he is a famous pirate. Lu En is still looking at the appearance of Pinglu Island. There are not many people in the port here. It is very different from the port of Mushroom Town where people come and go. There are many trading ships, tourist ships, etc. docked at the port of Mushroom Town. The port here on Pinglu Island only docks a large number of fishing boats, and only one or two merchant ships can be seen, which is very rare. Without sufficient economic trade and exchanges, the economic situation of Pinglu Island will naturally be very poor. What's the hurry? Listening to Bart's endless chatter, Lu En glanced at him and said bluntly, don't be rash when doing things, plan first and then act. So, you send some people to land on Pinglu Island to find out the news, and I will wait for your good news here on the warship. I'm a little sleepy. I'll take a nap first. As he was talking, Lu En was about to lie down on the chair again. Seeing this, Bart was speechless for a while. Don't be rash when doing things, plan first and then act. Colonel Lu En, you are just trying to be lazy, just say it. Why bother to find such a common excuse? Bart didn't believe what Lu En said just now. However, at present, it is a good idea to let him lead a part of the people to land on Pinglu Island, sneak in, and quietly check the news and intelligence. No way. With such a lazy colonel, Bart can only do everything by himself, and he doesn't expect Lu En to make any wise decisions. Wait. Just when Bart was about to mobilize people to land on Pinglu Island, his pupils shrank slightly, and he stared at the figure not far from the port. He is the rebellious Marine Rear Admiral Drake? Bart lost his voice. He quickly stopped Lu En, who was about to lie down on the chair. Colonel Lu En, I seem to have discovered Drake's figure. As he was speaking, he also noticed. The rebellious Marine Rear Admiral opposite the port seemed to have noticed the warship docked on the coast. He found us. Bart shouted. Don't shout, I heard it. Lu En scratched his ears and returned to the deck fence. It is normal that such a huge target as a warship would attract people's attention. Arriving here, Lu En looked in the direction pointed by Bart. As expected, he did see the figure of Drake, the Marine Rebel. One of the 11 supernovas of the future evil generation. Even the current Drake has not yet exceeded the bounty of 200 million berry, but his strength is considered to be one of the best even if looking at the entire North Blue. Drake, more than 2 meters tall, wearing dark blue Western clothes, carrying a samurai sword and a Western sword on his waist. His clothes and dress are extremely Western style, and he is also wearing a black cloak robe. On his exposed chest, there is a big black X symbol engraved. He is wearing a black hat and is lowering his head, making it impossible to see his facial expression clearly. No doubt. Drake obviously also discovered the warship docked on the coast at this moment. It can only be said that the area of this warship is too large and does not have any hidden attributes at all. Colonel Lu En, do you want to capture him? Bart couldn't help asking. The target person was right in front of him, so of course he wanted to capture him directly, which would greatly save the time of investigating him. Are you kidding me? Lu En looked at Bart as if he was looking at a fool. Rebellious Marine Rear Admiral Drake. When he betrayed Marine, he was already Marine Rear Admiral. After so many years, how strong do you think he will become? Besides, our main task this time is just to investigate Drake's purpose. Are you adding to my workload for no reason? What's more, Drake's bounty is as high as hundreds of millions of berries. Like these pirates with bounties of more than 100 million berries, one or two of them are as strong as monsters. At this point, Lu En waved his hand and said lazily, I can't beat him, I really can't beat him. I'm just a marine colonel. You want me to deal with these monsters with bounties of hundreds of millions? What a joke. Bart. If I didn't happen to see that Colonel Lu En just split the entire sea with a knife yesterday, I'm afraid I really believed your nonsense. Although Drake is indeed very powerful, after all, he is also a pirate with a bounty of hundreds of millions. But, Colonel Lu En, your strength is definitely more than 100 times more terrifying than his. If even Drake can be called a monster, then what are you? A monster among monsters? Chapter 33. Someone is always trying to stop me from being a wage thief, 4th update. At the same time, while Lu En and Bart were communicating, Drake, the marine rebel who had just appeared on the coast of Pink Island port, also stopped his steps that were supposed to continue forward. He raised his head and looked at the warship docked at the port with a solemn look in his eyes. Marine? Are you here to arrest me? What a trouble? Drake raised his eyebrows slightly, with a bit of impatience in his eyes. As one of the pirates with the highest bounty in North Blue, Drake is naturally very confident. The local marine of North Blue can't do anything to him. Unless the combat power of at least Vice Admiral of Naval Headquarters is dispatched. It is possible to pose a certain threat to him, below Vice Admiral. It's just to deliver food. And the warship in front of him, Drake knew it at a glance. This is obviously a warship of the local marine branch of North Blue, not from Naval Headquarters Marineford. It seems that I can only temporarily interrupt and investigate the Don Quixote family's slave trading business. Yes. The reason why Drake showed up on the small island of Pinglu Island was to secretly track down the slave trade industry chain of North Blue. After a period of investigation, he found that the source of all slave trades was closely related to this island called Pinglu Island. And in the process of investigation, he found traces of Don Quixote family. Therefore, he initially deduced that the biggest slave trade industry chain in North Blue was backed by Don Quixote family. The umbrella was Doflamingo, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. And Pinglu Island, this island is obviously the base camp of Don Quixote family's slave trade, specializing in capturing slaves and concentrating them on Pinglu Island. Then, they are distributed one by one in batches to all parts of the world. It's a pity that we haven't found clear evidence to indicate that the slave trade industry chain is controlled by the Don Quixote family. Even if we catch some members of the Don Quixote family and pry open their mouths, they still can't be used as witnesses to point to the Don Quixote family's crimes. If I were given more time, I should be able to find more evidence. It's a pity that First didn't expect Marine to come here at the critical moment. Drake thought a little irritably. He just got halfway through the investigation, so he naturally didn't want to give up. But there was no way. The Marines had come to Pinglu Island, and as a pirate, he naturally couldn't continue the investigation. Forget it. Let these Marines handle the rest, but... Drake looked at the warship docked at the port with a sharp look in his eyes. He had already made a decision in his heart. Before leaving Pinglu Island, I need to teach these Marines a lesson. At the very least, I have to destroy this warship. I don't want to be chased by a Marine warship all over the sea. With this idea in mind, Drake did not retreat, on the contrary. He also took the initiative to walk towards the warship docked at the port. During this period, he slowly took out the saber that looked like a western sword from his waist. And the scene of Drake approaching the warship on his own initiative. Naturally, it could not escape the attention of Lu En and Bart on the deck of the warship. Bart was shocked. Immediately, he shouted angrily. How dare you? You met our Marine, but you didn't run away. Instead, you wanted to attack our Marine? Looking at Drake holding the saber, it was obvious that he was not a good person. Bart immediately gave a solemn order to all the Marines around him. All troops are on alert. Prepare to fight. Immediately, 40 or 50 Marines took out their weapons and stared at the attacking Drake with solemn eyes. Everyone knew it very well. The rebellious Marine Rear Admiral in front of him had already served as the Marine Rear Admiral before he rebelled against the Marine. The opponent's strength is very strong. Therefore, they must be alert and be ready. But fortunately, they are not without a chance of winning. After all, on their side, there is also a monster-like existence. Thinking of this, the tense mood of the Marines relaxed slightly, and they looked at Lu En's back with expectation and admiration. Gradually, Drake's footsteps came to a sudden stop. At this time, he was already standing not far from the port, less than 10 meters away from the warship. Close distance. Drake looked at Lu En, Bart and other Marines, and said coldly, You Marines are really haunting. I didn't expect you to chase us to Pinglu Island. But, you can only chase me here. Before, I was too kind to you Marines, so you had some misunderstandings about my strength. But all this will change dramatically with everything that is about to happen. Want to arrest me? Just you? You are far from qualified. At the very least, you must dispatch a Vice Admiral of the headquarters and 3 large warships. As for you, today, I will show you, facing the real strong men in this sea, how fragile your strength is. so that you can deeply recognize how big the gap between us is. After speaking, a fierce momentum emanated from Drake's body. Boom, the overwhelming aura was full of oppression. Even without using the Devil Fruit ability, Drake's swordsmanship level was still very strong, and he could be called one of the top swordsmen in North Blue. Obviously, in Drake's opinion, he didn't need to use the Devil Fruit ability to deal with this group of North Blue Marines. The overwhelming and fierce aura emanated from Drake's body and swept across the entire warship in front. Bart and other Marines looked solemn and felt pressured. Seeing Drake coming fiercely, Lu En couldn't help rolling her eyes. Okay, we are just following each other, that's enough. You are getting more and more addicted to pretending, right? You are afraid that everyone doesn't know that you are an undercover agent of Marine, right? If you jump again, I will immediately reveal your undercover status as Marine. Do you believe it? Hey, I have to interrupt you in advance. Lu En interrupted Drake's personal show. To be honest, I really don't want to fight with monsters like you. Big pirates like you with bounties of hundreds of millions of berry are as strong as monsters. If I say we are not here to arrest you, do you believe me? In fact, we are just here to investigate the reason why you appeared on Pinglu Island, that's all. Don't think too much. If we really want to arrest you, it won't just be our Marines. You should know this. Hearing this, Drake suddenly realized, he believed it. Indeed, if they really want to arrest him, Marine can't send out so few people. How much do they look down on him? They just sent a few North Blue Marines to arrest him. Isn't this just sending people to their deaths? Thinking of this, Drake felt a little relieved, but he still didn't leave. As an undercover Marine, he had to increase his bounty as much as possible so that he could better integrate into the group of pirates. So any attack on Marine is the best way for him to increase his bounty. Since the warship in front of him happened to appear on Pinglu Island, and he happened to hit it, he would not let go of the opportunity to increase his bounty. I believe it. But Drake had a blank expression on his face. You still can't avoid the ending of being buried in this sea today. He clenched the saber in his hand, and suddenly, he launched a surprise attack on the warship in front. Seeing this, Lu En was helpless. He tried his best to persuade you. He still couldn't persuade you. What else can he do? Everyone saw it. He took the initiative to deliver it to the door. If I catch you, even if it destroys the undercover plan formulated by the Marine executives, no one can find fault with it, right? Why can't you let me slack off at work and let me be a wage thief? Is it difficult? Not difficult. There are always people who want to stop me from being a wage thief. It's really hateful. Sooner or later, I will be promoted to the position of Admiral of Headquarters because of you who actively deliver performance to me. It's so hateful. I really don't want to be a so-called Marine Admiral. Please don't send me performance anymore. Chapter 34. Drake is intimidated by his imposing manner. Monster. 5th update. 3K big chapter, please give me flowers. The coast of Pinkshima Port. A brand new medium-sized warship docked at the shore. On the deck. Witnessing Drake's sudden attack, Lu En had a blank expression on his face, turned to Bart beside him and said, "Lend me your sword." Up to now, Lu En has not had his own special saber. He looked down on ordinary sabers, and famous swords cannot be obtained in a short time. Even the worst good sword among famous swords is hard to come by. Lu En is not like Zoro, who can get a magic sword by passing by a knife shop, and the shopkeeper also took the initiative to give him a good sword. Yes. Bart quickly took out the saber he carried on his waist and handed it to Lu En. Taking the samurai sword handed by Bart, Lu En weighed it casually. It was very light, although there were many shortcomings. But it was more than enough to deal with Drake in front of him. Lu En, holding the samurai sword, turned his eyes and stood on the deck of the warship, looking down at the attacking Drake in front of him. Drake came with great momentum. Are you a young Marine genius from North Blue? Want to fight me one-on-one? Sensing Lu En's every move, Drake raised his eyebrows slightly, and guessed something in his heart. Then, he couldn't help but say, "Young man, let me, as a former Marine senior, teach you a good lesson. By the way, I will leave you a profound lesson. Looking at your clothes, you seem to be a Marine colonel. You can be awarded the rank of Marine colonel by the headquarters at such a young age. It seems that you are not simple. But it's a pity. The enemy you are facing at this moment is a real sea powerhouse far beyond your imagination. Let me give you a vivid educational course in person." After speaking, Drake has approached the coast of the port and faced all the Marines on the warship at close range. Of course, his main target is Lu En. Perhaps as an undercover agent of Marine, he was excited to see the prey, and wanted to temporarily teach this young talent of Marine a lesson as a senior of Marine, so as to stimulate his better growth in this sea. At the same time, Lu En took a step slowly. He took a step forward, holding a samurai sword in hand, and jumped off the deck of the warship. Both feet landed steadily. He was already standing at the port of Pinkshi Island. With his feet on the soft soil soaked by seawater, Lu En looked at the attacking Drake indifferently. He held a samurai sword in his hand, and an unparalleled sharp sword pressure slowly emanated from his body. In an instant, boom, the shocking sharp aura of the swordsman, centered around Lu En's body, spread in all directions. This overwhelming momentum was about to penetrate the sky. covering an area of hundreds of meters in radius. The sharp sword energy that burst out from Lu En's body, with an aura that can destroy everything in the world and is indestructible, can even cut off the hardest object in the world. The aura of the great swordsman covered the entire field. Lu En's eyes became extremely sharp, like an eagle, and the sharp aura emitted from his sharp pupils was directly approaching Drake, who was attacking from the front. It was as if he was the world's #1 swordsman, Haki Mahawk. Before he made a move, just holding a saber, exuding the aura of a top swordsman all over his body, was enough to stop countless swordsmen in their tracks, not daring to try to get close, let alone try to challenge. At this moment, Lu En burst out with a similar sharp aura pressure. No, to be more precise, it was an aura pressure that surpassed Hawkeye, the world's #1 swordsman. At this moment, Drake, who was approaching Lu En and was about to launch an attack, naturally felt the earth-shaking aura pressure that burst out from Lu En's body at the first time. The overwhelming terror made Drake's steps come to an abrupt halt, with horror, shock, and disbelief on his face. His attack on Lu En was abruptly stopped. He stopped. Drake lowered his head and looked at his right hand holding the saber, which was trembling slightly. It was completely out of his control. His right hand couldn't help but tremble slightly. His whole body was also trembling slightly, it seemed like. Fear and trembling from the depths of his soul. The fear of the soul resonated with the body, so that Drake could not control his trembling body at all, and his trembling right hand, holding the saber tightly, could lose control of the saber at any time. This is... Drake was horrified. His eyes were wide open, and his face was full of horror as he stared at the figure of the 16-year-old boy in front of him. The other party held a samurai sword, and the aura and pressure he exuded made Drake seem to be facing the legendary world's #1 swordsman. This absurd idea made him feel unacceptable. Hey. Is this true? What a stunning aura. How can a young man who is no older than 16 possess such a stunning aura and pressure? Even more terrifying than those world-class swordsmen in the sea. Drake couldn't help but doubt his life. Is it because the world is changing too fast? To the point that he couldn't keep up with the pace of the world's changes? A boy of only 16 years old, it actually gave him a sense of déjà vu as if he was facing a world-class top swordsman. What kind of monster is this? Drake screamed in his heart. For a moment, he didn't dare to look directly into Lu En's sharp eyes. He didn't dare to look into the latter's eagle-like eyes. As a swordsman with good swordsmanship, this was a great shame for Drake. A swordsman didn't even dare to look into the enemy's eyes. What does this mean? This means, he has been scared out of his wits. He doesn't even have the courage to face the other party. Shame. This is the first time in Drake's life that he has felt such a huge shame. How could such a terrifying monster appear in a place like North Blue? A world-class swordsman who is only 16 years old. Although Lu En has not yet made a move, the shocking and terrifying aura alone is enough for Drake, who is also a swordsman, to be sure. The swordsmanship level of this young boy in front of him must be extremely terrifying and powerful. Even in the Grand Line, such a level of swordsmanship is definitely one of the best. Drake didn't say a word, he had an illusion. The swordsmanship level of this 16-year-old boy in front of him might be comparable to that of the legendary world's #1 swordsman, Haki Mahawk. It was this terrifying thought that made Drake completely give up the idea of trying to shake the boy who was as terrifying as a monster in front of him with just swordsmanship. Drake was swept by the shocking and monstrous aura and pressure, and his body was unable to move at all for a while, and he couldn't move an inch, and he couldn't try to get close to Lu En at all. The body was trembling slightly from being oppressed. This was an instinctive reaction of the human body. It was an uncontrollable reaction of the body when facing extremely terrifying and dangerous things. The 16-year-old boy in front of him was like a flood and a beast, which frightened Drake. He couldn't even imagine it in his dreams. A small place like North Blue could still produce such a terrifying monster. It stands to reason. Shouldn't Marine have dispatched a monster of this level to Grand Line long ago? Why must it stay in a small place like North Blue? Why not go to Grand Line to make a name for itself, but stay in North Blue to bully others? I don't understand. It's really hard to understand. As an undercover agent who cares about Marine, Drake is naturally happy and relieved that a genius monster of this level can emerge from Marine. But, at this moment, he needs to face a monster of this level. This gives him a headache, but the arrow is on the string and has to be shot. He has begun to regret it. Maybe, from the beginning, he shouldn't have come here to provoke this warship. He shouldn't have come here to provoke this monster boy in front of him. This monster boy is more dangerous, terrifying, and powerful than all the enemies he has encountered before. It's like facing a real monster of the sea. Facing a terrifying monster of this level for the first time, it is obviously completely different from Drake's previous small fights. Thinking of this, Drake gritted his teeth. It seems that I have to get serious. He put the saber back to his waist and carried it. Then, he took a deep breath, and his mind moved. In an instant, everyone in the audience could see it clearly. Drake's body gradually began to grow, from more than 2 meters tall to more than 3 meters tall in an instant, and the height was still rising. As if he used the Devil Fruit ability. Zone Ancient Species Allosaurus form. A prehistoric dinosaur was born. Finally, Drake transformed into the L-Source form, about 7 or 8 meters tall, an absolute behemoth, almost the same height as the warship. This caused Bart and other Marines on the warship to be terrified. Drake was now extremely large, with a dark green body, and the aura and pressure emanating from his body was several times stronger than before. A wild and fierce aura emanated from him, which vaguely blocked the fierce aura and pressure from Lu En's body. Are you serious? Lu En held a samurai sword and looked at Drake, who had already transformed into the L-Source form. Originally, he wanted to intimidate the other party with his aura, so as to force the other party to retreat and let the other party retreat. In this way, there would be no need to continue to fight. But after all, he didn't expect Drake to be so stubborn and still unyielding. Even if he used the Devil Fruit ability, he still had to come and attack firmly. In that case, then I won't pretend to be a gentleman anymore. Lu En revealed his cards. Chapter 35 Drake. Why would I mess with this monster? Update 1. So strong. They are both so strong. Colonel Lu En is very strong, but the rebellious Marine Rear Admiral Drake on the opposite side is not weak at all. Zone Demon Fruit power. And he looks very strong. Can Colonel Lu En win? Nonsense. Hawkeye has a nickname called Little Lu En when he came to our North Blue. How strong do you think Colonel Lu En is? It's definitely no problem to deal with a mere Marine rebel. Although they said so, the terrible momentum and pressure emitted by Drake's zone form caused a group of Marines to be worried and looked at Lu En's figure with worry. Compared with Derek's appearance of a 7 to 8 meter tall dinosaur, Lu En, even at a height of 1.9 meters, looks particularly small. If we only talk about body size, Lu En is naturally far inferior to Drake. Even in terms of momentum, Drake, who has transformed into his own form, exudes a fierce aura, and it seems that he is not afraid of the aura and pressure from Lu En, the great swordsman. Before he defected from the Marine, he was able to serve as the Marine Rear Admiral, which is enough to show that his strength is not simple. Moreover, he is a demon fruit power of the ancient zone species. He is stronger than ordinary zone ability users. Even if Colonel Lu En can win, it shouldn't be too easy, right? Bart's face sank, and he calmly analyzed. Although he was very confident in Lu En's strength, at the moment, the Marine defector Drake on the opposite side seemed to be a difficult person. After all, he was a pirate with a bounty of over 100 million. And he was an extremely rare demon fruit power of the ancient zone species. Don't put pressure on Colonel Lu En. This level of battle is obviously not something we can participate in. We don't cause trouble to Colonel Lu En, which is already a great help to the Colonel. Bart solemnly reminded the Marines, at this time. In the battlefield, Drake transformed into his own L-Source, and his fangs and claws looked oppressive. However, what Lu En couldn't complain about was Drake, who was transformed into a 7 or 8 meter tall L-Source, was still wearing that unique Western-style clothing, and the clothing didn't burst at all. Could it be that the clothing he was wearing could be freely enlarged and reduced? Sure enough. Oda knows nothing about One Piece. He is just a dead painter. He knows nothing. Come on, let me see how strong the world-class swordsman is. Although it is hard to imagine that a boy who is only 16 years old can be a world-class top swordsman. But I still want to feel the pressure from a world-class strong man. Drake was full of fighting spirit. Even though he knew that Lu En was very strong, he still did not retreat, but faced it head-on. Lu En held a samurai sword, facing Drake's active attack. He sighed slightly. Solve it as soon as possible. You can still go back and take a nap. With this thought in mind, Lu En held the samurai sword and slowly swung it in the direction of Drake. The samurai sword seemed to be swung lightly, a sword slashed down. But in an instant, an incomparable and terrifying sword energy was fully released from the samurai sword in Lu En's hand. The brilliant blue sword energy light surrounded the samurai sword in Lu En's hand, flashing an extremely dazzling halo, trying to blind Drake's eyes. Then, whoosh, accompanied by a sharp and piercing sound of breaking through the air. Lu En swung a sword, immediately slashed out an extremely sharp and shocking slash. The blue slash burst out from the samurai sword and rushed towards Drake's position. Wherever it passed, it seemed that even the space was cut off. Buzz, buzz, the space kept creeping and twisting. Like a mirror that was about to break. The whole space was trembling, crumbling, and collapsing at any time. Boom, the azure blue slash cut through the sky, and the bursts of air breaking sounds were extremely piercing. It rushed straight to Drake's body at a speed faster than the speed of sound. The earth-shaking terrifying momentum rushed towards him, and Drake, who was transformed into the ancient zone L-Source, clearly felt an extremely shocking threat of death. An extremely strong sense of crisis enveloped his whole body. It was as if he was on the edge of a deep abyss, and even had one foot in the abyss. Drake was terrified and shocked. Hey, hey, hey. What an amazing sword slash. Such power is too exaggerated. He was unbelievable. He was completely shocked, I thought. After transforming into Zone's ancient form, he would be able to compete with the world-class swordsman who was only 16 years old. But now, feeling the oppression brought by the azure stunning slash, he immediately realized. He was too fanciful after all. The horror of the world-class top swordsman was not as simple as he imagined. With this knife, I might die. No, not a possibility. But a certainty. I will definitely die. The extremely strong sense of crisis made Drake's hair stand on end, and he had such a feeling from the bottom of his heart. It was not an illusion, it was a very intuitive intuition. I can only say, this sharp slash from Lu En's hand was too terrifying. Even as strong as Drake, he smelled an extremely strong threat of death from this slash. This was the first time in his life that he felt so close to death. As the distance got closer and closer, in Drake's eyes, there was only a brilliant azure color left. The whole world seemed to be filled with the light released by this slash. Crack. Crack. Accompanied by a series of sharp and piercing sounds, Drake became more and more horrified. Wherever this azure slash passed, just the release of the aftermath of the sword energy actually split the land in half. The ground had already cracked, and a hideous crack like an abyss appeared. The whole land was forcibly split by this knife, unbelievable. A bottomless crack was cut out on the ground, as deep as the abyss. This made Drake wonder if the whole island was forcibly split and cut from the front by this slash. Hiss. He couldn't help but take a breath of cold air, and his mind was shocked. Wow. Cut the whole island in half with one knife? It must be fake. What kind of amazing swordsmanship level is needed to do this? Can the world's #1 swordsman Haki do it? Although he had never witnessed Hawkeye's attack, Drake always felt that even the strongest swordsman in the world would not be able to deliver such a powerful blow. Doesn't this mean that the swordsmanship of this 16-year-old monster boy in front of him has not only reached the world level, but also can be compared with the world's strongest swordsman? Or even surpass the world's strongest swordsman? I must be crazy. This absurd thought was quickly suppressed by Drake. At the same time, as the slash came across, the earth was forcibly cut and cut off, and a series of movements were heard. The whole ground was shaking slightly, as if a small earthquake had arrived. Rumble. The earth shook. The sky collapsed and the earth cracked. It was like the crust plates were moving violently. Drake, who was in the shaking crust area, couldn't help but shake slightly. Gulu. Drake swallowed his saliva uncontrollably, looking forward with horror, shock, and awe. Through the bright blue light released by the slash, he saw the young figure holding the samurai sword. That young man was as strong as a monster. Will I die here? Killed in one blow by this monster boy in front of me? Drake wanted to cry but had no tears. After countless special trainings, he was arranged to leave Marine and become an undercover agent of Marine. Could it be that today, he will die tragically at the hands of a Marine colleague? This is really a tragedy. The Marine executives took great pains to arrange him as an undercover agent in the pirates. But now, he is about to face the fate of being killed in 1 second by a Marine colleague. I have to say, he regrets it now. Even his intestines are almost green with regret. Why did I provoke such a terrifying monster just now? The key is, can anyone explain it? Why can a Marine boy who is only 16 years old be so strong? Moreover, he is so strong that it is beyond the standard. Exaggeratingly strong. Extraordinarily strong. Is he really 16 years old? Chapter 36 Drake. I saw my grandmother coming to pick me up, second update. At this moment, in Drake's eyes, the whole world was only a dazzling blue. As blue as the sky and the sea. That fierce slash had already split the port area in half. The ground was left with hideous and terrifying cracks, like a bottomless abyss. The aftermath of this shocking slash triggered crustal movement, and the whole island seemed to be shaking slightly. Crack. Crack. The surface cracked. The earth was forcibly split apart. Cracks spread in all directions. Even if it was just the spread of the aftermath, it still carried a fierce momentum that was enough to destroy everything in the world. It caused tragic destruction like an earthquake. It was like a natural disaster. The entire port had been cut in half. The shocking slash from the port was aimed at Drake and the entire island behind him. Boom. The entire Pinglu island was shaking and trembling. The whole island looked like it was enveloped by a major earthquake. The aftermath of the sword energy swept in all directions, crushing everything around. At the same time, affected by the airflow generated by the aftermath, all the crushed objects turned into countless fragments, dancing in the sky and flying all over the sky. The debris in the sky was shocking, and Drake, who was at the center of the range of the slashing force, was left with only deep despair in his heart at this moment. Is he going to die? Feeling the azure slashing close at hand, Drake felt extremely bitter. Facing this level of terrifying slashing, he didn't even have the thought of resisting. The only trace of luck left in his heart was directly extinguished. Only deep despair and fear remained. This can only be said. The gap in strength between the two sides is too big. The monster boy in front of him, who was only 16 years old, was so terrifying that he could not even think of trying to resist. It was the first time in his life that he encountered such a powerful monster. In the past, even the Marine Vice Admiral level strongmen, even the Marine Admiral, who was the ceiling level of the sea. But in Drake's opinion, these people are far inferior to the monster boy in front of him. This boy has become a psychological shadow of Drake. At this moment, he couldn't help but recall in his mind. At first, when facing the monster boy, he even had the leisure to provoke the other party. He kept saying that he was a senior of Marine and tried to teach the other party with a condescending attitude. But now, as he felt the other party's monster-like powerful strength, Drake's heart suddenly felt ashamed and panicked. He couldn't imagine it. What kind of monster was he trying to provoke before? If it wasn't too late, Drake even wanted to reveal his identity as a Marine undercover. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Even so, he couldn't help shouting in his heart, "Brother! One of us! I am one of us, don't be impulsive, I'm an undercover Marine." Of course, Drake couldn't say the above words now. Good night, macaw macaw. He closed his eyes helplessly, ready to quietly wait for death. He didn't think at all. He could block this amazing slash that was enough to split the entire island. In a trance, Drake vaguely seemed to see his grandmother coming to pick him up. Closer. The slash was getting closer, finally. This azure blue slash passed by Drake and slashed at the entire island behind him. In an instant, boom, the shocking slash hit the center of the island, and there was a loud and thunderous sound. Deafening. Resounding through the sky, it was as if the sky was split open. The sky collapsed. The loud sound swept hundreds of miles away. The aftermath of the explosion even caused the seawater on the port coast to roll violently. Drake, who was transformed into a 7 or 8 meter tall allosaurus by the aftermath of the slash, instantly stood up from the ground with a ton of body, and was blown hundreds of meters away by the aftermath. His body rolled wildly in the air, extremely embarrassed. The power released by the aftermath alone almost crushed Drake's body. It made him suffer a lot. As the chi and blood in his abdomen surged and rushed to his throat, he couldn't help but open his mouth and spit out blood crazily. His face turned very pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. The vitality of his body dropped rapidly. The breathing rhythm also became extremely disordered. The internal chi was weak and sluggish. Drake flew backwards hundreds of meters away, and then fell heavily to the ground. Boom! The 7 or 8 meters tall, tons-weight allosaurus fell to the coast hundreds of meters away, rolling on the ground for dozens of rounds before slowly stopping, raising a cloud of dust that danced and flew all over the sky. The traces left by the friction on the ground were even more hideous, and they also carried the bloodline that flowed down and infected the dust on the ground after Drake's skin was cut. Drake was almost knocked into the sea, but even so, his body at this moment was already seriously injured. Although it was not a life-threatening situation, it was definitely not good. The body was like being pressed down by a towering mountain, and the internal organs were almost damaged and displaced. Of course. The worst was not Drake himself. In fact, he was not hit by this shocking slash from the front. He was seriously injured on the spot just by the impact of the aftermath, and his body was almost torn apart. You can imagine. The power that erupted from the front of this slash was absolutely beyond imagination. The azure slash sent Drake flying, and the power that erupted from the front was directed at the entire Pinglu island, crossing all the way. Wherever it passed, the earth was torn apart, the surface cracked, and the entire ground was forcibly split in half. Crack. Crack. Sharp and piercing sounds rang out one after another. I saw. The entire Pinglu island had been forcibly shaken, and the ground was cracked inch by inch. The most hideous crack was naturally caused by this slash, which was as deep as an abyss. The crack extended all the way from the port coast to the central area inside the island. So far, this slash has split a huge crack of more than 1,000 meters. Moreover, the most terrifying truth is, this is just the beginning. In the hideous cracks that split the entire island, there was even a faint sound of the pleasant sound of the currents hitting each other. It is not difficult to see that even the chassis of the entire island has been split. Otherwise, it would be impossible to hear the sound of the currents hitting each other from the bottom of the island and the deep sea in this hideous crack. It can be seen from this that this slash caused such amazing destructive power. The island was really split from top to bottom. In addition, everything that blocked this slash was split into two, directly split in half, and destroyed beyond recognition. For example, the century-old trees around the coast of the island, some wild animals that had not yet escaped, and some solid rocks. All objects basically could not escape the fate of being split in half by this slash. This slash was like a bulldozer, pushing all the way straight to the inner core area of the island. So, the crack marks on the entire island became longer and longer, and the area of the crack became wider and wider. Even some residential houses that had been abandoned for many years were inevitably split in half. Boom boom. This azure blue slash was going to forcibly destroy the entire island. Chapter 37. One plan to attack. Split the entire island. 3 updates. At the same time, the inner area of Pinglu Island. There are no residents living in this area around the central area. A few years ago, a group of uninvited guests came to Pinglu Island. They relied on their own strength, although they did not burn, kill and plunder the local residents of the island. But they drove all the residents of Pinglu Island to live in the most remote places on the island. The local residents had to give up the most central area of the island and began to build huge buildings for these uninvited guests. Therefore, there are many building groups here. The local residents do not know where these uninvited guests came from, nor do they know their purpose. They only know that after they came to Pinglu Island, they built buildings crazily. Moreover, from these buildings, the local residents would hear the miserable screams of men and women from time to time. Whenever the night was quiet, the miserable screams coming from the buildings were even more eye-catching and harsh. This made the local residents even more afraid and terrified of these uninvited guests. Among them, there were not only men and women in the screams, but also children. The local residents had some guesses. These buildings probably hold many slaves. These slaves are undergoing cruel training, so they scream from time to time. Even if they knew the truth, the local residents did not dare to speak out, let alone try to inform Marine. They only wanted to protect themselves and their lives, and did not dare to interfere too much in these things that were beyond their ability. This day, located in the center of countless building groups, there is a super large warehouse. This large warehouse with a huge area is the concentration and base camp for Don Quixote family to store slaves. The warehouse has an area of no less than 100,000 square meters. There are no less than tens of thousands of slaves stored in it. These slaves are to be sent to all parts of the world. At this time, in the warehouse, groups of slaves were imprisoned in cages, just like animals in iron cages. Every slave lost his original brilliance and looked lifeless. Obviously, he had lost his expectations and hope for life, and lived numbly like a puppet. And there were two people in charge of managing this group of slaves. Both of them are from Don Quixote family. One is called Stater, a weaker Don Quixote family cadre. He specializes in coordinating slaves, sorting out documents for the distribution of slaves around the world, and instructing people to distribute slaves to all parts of the world. He is also responsible for receiving various customers from all over the world. In short, he is responsible for many matters such as slave trading and logistics. He is not good at fighting and is just a civilian cadre of Don Quixote family. Another Don Quixote family cadre named Terry is responsible for combat matters. For example, he is responsible for training slaves, punishing slaves, and security work. One is civil and the other is military, as the main person in charge of this super large slave trading industry chain built by Don Quixote family in North Blue. In the past few years, the two have cooperated perfectly. Never made a mistake. Let the slave industry chain of Don Quixote family flourish. These days, it seems that a little mouse has sneaked into Pinglu Island and tried to investigate the slave trade here. I'm worried that he might attract the attention of Marine. Stater is a middle-aged man who looks elegant, wearing a neat suit and exuding a gentle bookish air. Judging from his appearance alone, I'm afraid no one can associate him with a slave trader. And Terry, who stood in front of Stater, looked very simple. He was 5 big and 3 strong, with a strong back and waist, and was nearly 3 meters tall. He was obviously a rough man who was very good at fighting. Don't worry, I will catch this little mouse myself. Then, I will put him in a cage, play with him, and kill time with him. Terry grinned, and a murderous aura emanated from his body. He usually likes to torture slaves. So, he wanted to immediately catch this little rat who dared to sneak into Pingshi Island to investigate. Then, he would torture him and watch him beg for mercy. As a cadre of the Don Quixote family who is responsible for fighting, his strength is naturally very strong. In a small place like North Blue, as long as he does not offend a giant like the Vinsmoke family, he can basically stand at the top of North Blue with his strength. This is why he is so confident. By the way, this warehouse used to collectively detain slaves cannot be lost. So, does the gate here need to be strengthened? Just in case. State asked. Don't worry, this warehouse was built with countless solid materials long before it was built. For example, even the wall of the warehouse is 3 meters thick. The inside is inlaid with steel bars as thick as an arm. As for the door of the warehouse, sea stone is even integrated as an auxiliary material. The solidity of sea stone is needless to say. You can rest assured. No one can break the door and wall of the warehouse and take away the slaves imprisoned in the warehouse. Terry was full of confidence, however, just as Terry's words fell. Boom! Accompanied by a loud bang, the entire slave warehouse was shaken violently. The earth shook. The surface of the ground trembled. Like an earthquake. The earth shook. Even the slaves imprisoned in the iron cages fell over. At this time, I saw the door of this super large slave warehouse, this solid door with sea stone as an auxiliary material. At this moment, it was split open from the front by an extremely dazzling azure slash. No hindrance, it was like splitting a piece of tofu. Directly cut in half. This, how is it possible? Following the sound of the explosion, Terry couldn't help but widen his eyes when he saw this, with a look of horror and shock. Then, before he could react, that azure sharp slash, with a terrifying force that could cut off everything in the world, attacked him from the front. The speed was extremely fast, like a flash of a meteor. Cutting through the sky, with unstoppable force. Approaching at a speed several times faster than the speed of sound. Terry was terrified. The deep fear completely dominated his body and mind. Powerless, desperate, but at this moment, his body was still unable to move at all. So, just a face to face. Puff! Terry's entire body was immediately split in half by this slash. A blood mist burst out of his body and flew all over the sky, staining the sky with blood. Chapter 38. An incredibly strong person. Chaos, 4th update. 3K big chapter, please give me flowers. Terry, the Don Quixote family cadre who was responsible for fighting, was killed in seconds. He was split in half from the front by a shocking slash from afar. He could not even scream the whole time, and was reduced to two cold corpses. The exploding bloodline was flying all over the sky. It was still vaguely visible. The two eyeballs left by the two cold corpses were full of fear and horror. Plop. Accompanied by a dull sound, Terry's two corpses fell to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. At the same time, a few drops of the scattered bloodline fell on the face of Stat, a civilian cadre of the Don Quixote family, dyeing his face, which was already extremely pale at the moment, red. Feeling the bloodline transmitted from his face, which still had some temperature, Stat was panicked, shocked, and unbelievable, and began to tremble violently all over his body uncontrollably. Lowering his head, he stared blankly at the two cold corpses lying on the ground with a face full of horror. Close distance. Terry's eyes that were still open in death made Stat feel numb and horrified. The death was too miserable. Even as a slave trader, Stat felt panic, fear and palpitations. A chill rose from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, making Stat's skin crawl, his legs weak, and he couldn't help but sit on the ground. Plop. His legs were weak, his limbs were weak, and he sat on the ground with his buttocks, staring blankly at the two pieces of his partner Terry's body next to him with his eyes wide open. How could this happen? What on earth happened? Stat felt that everything was like a dream. First, the warehouse door made of sea stone as an auxiliary material was pierced and cut off from the front by the shocking slash from afar. Then, Terry was very bad again, and was hit from the front by this sharp slash. There was no time to react in the whole process, and Terry was directly split in half. Even the sea stone gate couldn't withstand this terrifying blow, let alone Terry's flesh and blood. The development of all these things was completely beyond Stat's expectations. He felt panic and uneasiness in his heart. What shocked Stat even more was that, as his eyes moved slightly, from the two halves of Terry's body to the side, the hideous cracks left by the blow on the ground. The whole land was cut off. Not only the door of this warehouse, but even the land of this island was forcibly split open by the earth-shaking blow just now. Hey, is it true? Is this going to split the whole island? What kind of terrifying power is this? How can someone be so powerful? How can someone be so powerful? Stat was shocked. In comparison, the fact that Terry was cut into two pieces by a knife seemed a bit insignificant. The whole earth was penetrated by this slash. He stared blankly at the hideous cracks beside him, which were as deep as the abyss. And all this was just the damage caused by a slash. This moved him beyond belief. It was unimaginable. How powerful a strong man must be to be able to forcibly split an island. Just then, boom, another earth-shaking noise, like thunder. Deafening. The whole warehouse was hit by a major earthquake. The ground shook and trembled wildly. Stat, who was sitting on the ground, felt that his ears were about to go deaf, buzzing, causing his mental distraction. He endured the tingling in his brain and the discomfort in his body, and quickly raised his head and looked forward. See. After the door of the warehouse was split open, the 3-meter-thick warehouse wall was hit again. The wall, which was filled with countless steel bars and combined with countless concrete structures, was 3 meters thick and was directly penetrated and split by that indescribable shocking slash. These scenes fell into Stat's eyes very clearly, making his mood like the rolling waves, and it took a long time for him to calm down. The whole warehouse was split in half from beginning to end by a slash. This. Stat's lips trembled slightly. The slave warehouse, which was originally dark, was split from the front by the gate and its walls by the slash, and the sunlight from outside was able to shine into the warehouse. The slaves in the cage raised their heads and felt the dazzling sunlight. The long-lost warmth penetrated their hearts, making their numb hearts slightly change. The entire warehouse held thousands of slaves, some of which had been reserved by customers, and some needed to wait for customers to purchase them before being arranged to be sent to all parts of the world. Among them, there are men and women, and there are also children. There are no old people. There are handsome men, strong men, and some men who are 4 or 5 meters tall and comparable to small giants. They are very powerful, but they are still trapped in cages. Most of the women are young and beautiful, and there are also some mature and charming women. There are also nobles and princesses left after the destruction of some kingdoms. In short, there are almost all kinds of slaves in the warehouse. Click. Click. In this silent warehouse, a series of sharp and piercing sounds suddenly sounded. With great fear and shock, Stat hurriedly looked over. I saw. The ground that was split into a hideous crack, cracked into spider web-like cracks, and the number of cracks increased and became dense. The entire crust seemed to collapse at any time and sink into the sea. Looking closer, he couldn't even see the depth of this crack. I don't know if it's an illusion. I actually heard the sound of the sea flowing here? Stat's heart was shocked. What does this mean? The place where the bottom of the island connects to the sea has probably been split by the shocking slash just now. Therefore, he can hear the pleasant sound of the sea flowing inside the island. He couldn't imagine. What kind of terrifying and powerful existence is the one who released this shocking slash? It's simply a monster. Even if he is as strong as the young Master Doflamingo, he is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, and he is far from such a terrible strength, right? Gurgle, thinking of this, Stat couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He turned his head and looked at the direction where the azure blue slash had attacked just now. As expected, what he saw was the hideous crack left on the ground of the entire island after the shocking slash. The crack was bottomless and extended all the way to a farther place where the end could not be seen. Forcefully split the entire island in two. Seeing this, Stat had a strong premonition in his heart. This island, called Pinglu Island, was probably really split in half by an unimaginable monster at this moment. If I remember correctly, the diameter of Pinglu Island is as long as 20 kilometers, however, such a large island was split by a knife? Are you sure I'm not dreaming? Considering the huge area of Pinglu Island, Stat's head was a little dizzy. Next, before his shocked mood calmed down, something happened that made him feel extremely terrified. It can be seen. The cages of a few slaves were cut off by the force of the previous slash, and the iron cage formed by the arm-thick iron pillar was cut off. So, one slave after another walked out of the iron cage. I escaped? The feeling of seeing the light of day again made them feel like a dream, unreal, and completely like a dream. Feeling the long-lost breath of freedom, they all cried loudly, excited and overjoyed. It was like being reborn. Then, after they calmed down, they all fixed their angry eyes on Stat, who was sitting on the ground. Being stared at by a group of slaves who had escaped, Stat felt his hair stand up and his back went cold. What are you going to do? I'm warning you, if you dare to attack me, I will make you pay a heavy price. Don't think that you can regain your freedom just because you were temporarily out of the cage. As long as I give an order, those people outside will rush in immediately and put you back in the cage to continue to be detained. I advise you not to act rashly, and get back to your cage honestly, otherwise you will suffer physical pain later. If you insist on resisting, I swear, when I catch all of you back in the cage, it will be the beginning of your nightmare. I will definitely use more cruel means to torture you severely. While saying this, Stat took out the Den Den Mushi and quickly contacted the security personnel outside. Unfortunately, Stat's harsh words could not scare away the group of slaves in front of him who were completely overwhelmed by anger. At the same time, under Stat's urgent contact, a group of fully armed security personnel rushed in from outside. In an instant, a huge fight broke out. The entire slave warehouse was in complete chaos. Chapter 39 Miracle. Divine Punishment, Piss and Shit, First Update, 3K Chapter. Boom. The earth-shattering roar resounded through the sky and spread hundreds of miles away. It caused a roar in the sea around Pinglu Island, and even the Sea Kings were frightened and dived into the sea. Pinglu Island was shaking and trembling. The earth was shaking. It was like the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. The whole island was directly penetrated from the middle by a shocking slash. Split it forcibly. This azure blue shocking slash extended all the way to an area 20 kilometers away. It just so happened that the diameter of Pinglu Island was 20 kilometers long. So, Pinglu Island, with a diameter of 20 kilometers, was originally circular, but now, it was cut from the middle like cutting a cake. Split the entire Pinglu Island with a knife. The slash spanned 20 kilometers away. Before this, no one could imagine that this slash would bring such a terrifying destructive power. Pinglu Island, which was split in half by a knife, will slowly evolve into two islands in the future. However, at present, the two islands have only been cut off, and have not been completely separated. But if you come to Pinglu Island again in a month or so, you will see the birth of two semicircular islands. Rumble. The split Pinglu Island is still shaking violently, and many mountains have collapsed and slid down. The forest on the island was forcibly divided into two halves, and the birds and beasts fled in panic. If you look down from a high altitude, then you can see clearly. A thin line has appeared in the center of Pinglu Island. This line is naturally the trace of being split by that amazing slash. It's like a giant forcibly broke Pinglu Island in half. The thin line cuts Pinglu Island, split it into two. The crack in the middle of the island looks very smooth, like a mirror. So far, the sharp slash that runs through the island for 20 kilometers has finally gradually dissipated. It seems to have completed its mission, its disappearance. It brought the amazing record of Pinglu Island being divided into two. Cut in two. Even the island can be forcibly split. Fortunately, the local residents of Pinglu Island were forcibly expelled to remote locations around the island to live a few years ago because of the arrival of the uninvited guests of the Don Quixote family. So, the whole island was forcibly split, and it did not cause any harm or impact to these local residents. On the contrary, after sensing the huge movement from the island, these residents came closer and wanted to observe closely why the island was shaking so violently. Then, when they arrived at the center of the island, they were shocked to find that it seemed that the whole island had been split in half. Seeing this hideous crack that divided the island, it was bottomless, like an abyss. This shocked the hearts of these local residents. Even their worldview was about to shatter and collapse. They suffered from mental shock. This is. Is it a miracle? The residents said in trembling voices. The whole island was split apart. The local residents who often trade and communicate with the outside islands introduced in a shocked tone. The huge movement on the island just now was caused by the island being forcibly split apart by an unimaginable terrifying existence. The local residents who maintain a certain communication with the outside islands are naturally more knowledgeable than those local residents. Therefore, he can judge, this is definitely not a natural disaster. It is man-made, unbelievable, a scene comparable to a miracle is actually man-made? Someone split the entire Pinglu island in half with a knife? How powerful a strong man must be to do this? All the residents were completely out of control. Next, their eyes followed this hideous crack like an abyss. All the residents seemed to vaguely see the uninvited guests who once forced them to live in a remote location on the island. I am afraid that this time these people will not be able to escape the fate of being covered by this terrifying force that split the island. This is God's punishment. The older residents were so excited that they shed tears and spoke incoherently. Even the gods can't stand it anymore, so they send down divine punishment to severely punish this group of villains. Pirarugashima, Port Coast. A warship docked at the shore. At this time, on the deck of the warship, the Marines, led by Bart, were staring with wide eyes, stunned, and looking at the hideous crack that forcibly split the entire Pinglugashima island with shock on their faces. Witnessing the shocking scene of Pinglugashima being split by a knife, they still can't calm down until now. It took a long time. They gradually woke up. Wow. What kind of terrifying power is this? One knife split the entire island. The diameter of this island is as long as 20 kilometers, but even so, Colonel Lu En only used one knife to split it in half. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never dare to imagine this outrageous phenomenon in my life. Colonel Lu En is as strong as a monster. Now, if Haki, the world's #1 swordsman, comes to North Blue, he will really be called Little Lu En. The Marines were shocked and exclaimed, "Major, you seem to say just now." A Marine looked at Bart and said weakly, "Colonel Lu En might have some trouble dealing with that Marine rebel. Is that what you mean by trouble?" The whole island was split with one sword. To deal with a mere rebellious Marine Rear Admiral. Isn't this a piece of cake? It's as easy as pie? This. Bart, who was awakened from the shock, opened his mouth and was speechless for a while. He really couldn't have thought of it. Colonel Lu En would be so powerful. It's outrageous. A small island with a diameter of 20 kilometers was split in half with one sword. So, how strong is Colonel Lu En? How high is his swordsmanship? Bart's throat was dry and his head was in a mess. Someone asked, "Major, do you think that Colonel Lu En's swordsmanship level is strong enough to be compared with the world's #1 swordsman?" Although he had said before that Haki was North Blue's Little Lu En, but the title of the world's #1 swordsman is still very famous. I really can't judge. If he hadn't witnessed the amazing scene of Lu En splitting the entire island with one sword, Bart obviously tended to think that Haki's swordsmanship was better. After all, the title of the world's #1 swordsman is not just a boast, but is recognized by all swordsmen in the entire sea. But now, with Lu En splitting the entire island in half with one sword, Bart could no longer judge for a moment whether Colonel Lu En's swordsmanship was better, or the world's #1 swordsman Haki's swordsmanship was better? In any case, no matter which of the two people has a higher level of swordsmanship, the conclusion that Bart can draw at present is the level of swordsmanship that Colonel Lu En has can already be compared with the world's #1 like Haki. There is no doubt that Colonel Lu En has the world's top level of swordsmanship. When he thought of this, Bart's heart was greatly shaken. You know, Haki can become the world's #1 swordsman after decades of training, coupled with his extraordinary swordsmanship talent, to achieve today's achievements. However, what about Colonel Lu En? At the age of 16, his swordsmanship level is already strong enough to rival the world's #1. What kind of concept is this? Bart really didn't dare to think about it any further. How could such an extraordinary monster like Colonel Lu En appear in this sea? He said he couldn't understand it at all, at the same time. On the other side, Drake, who was blown away by the aftermath, was struggling to get up with his bruised body. When he stood up and saw the traces left at the scene, he couldn't help but widen his eyes and was completely dumbfounded. Strange, monster. His lips trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but blurt out. The whole island. It was really split by that boy with a knife. How can he be so strong? Gulu. Drake couldn't help but swallow his saliva, his face full of shock. He has now returned to human form. He used only one sword to forcibly split the island with a diameter of 20 kilometers. It's hard to imagine how strong that monster boy is. Could it be? Even the legendary world's #1 swordsman Haki can't compare to him? But he looks like he's only 15 or 16 years old. Looking at the crack that ran across the entire island, Drake felt a burst of fear and tingling. At this moment, he didn't know whether he should feel fortunate or confused. Facing the terrifying slash that split the entire island, he luckily saved his life, but he can be sure of one thing. This is not because he is lucky, it's purely, the monster boy didn't want to kill him. That's all. Otherwise, even if he had 10,000 lives, it would not be enough for the other party to kill him. The other party killed him as easily as killing a chicken without any pressure. But, why? Drake was shocked and puzzled. Why should he be spared? Did the other party know his identity as a Marine undercover? But, only a few Marine executives knew that he was a Marine undercover. The 16-year-old boy in front of him didn't look like he could get in touch with that level of secrets. Never mind. I have to run away before this monster notices me. Immediately, Drake fled in a panic, pissing and urinating, looking embarrassed. Since what happened just now, he no longer has any courage to try to face the 16-year-old Marine monster again. Drake swore he never wanted to meet this monster again in his life. Because, when facing this monster, he always had a sense of déjà vu as if he was facing a Marine Admiral. If so, this is the combat power of a 16-year-old Admiral? The more he thought about it, the more Drake lost his composure. Gradually, there was only one thought left in his mind. An unimaginable monster appeared in Marine. A monster that is even more terrifying than the 3 admirals of Marine. Chapter 40. Drake is wasting his talent by becoming a pirate. Update 2. Pinglu Island. Harbor Coast. The crack extends from the coast all the way through the entire island. The port where the warship is docked is the eastern port of Pinglu Island. Therefore, this crack that runs through the entire island extends directly to the western coast of Pinglu Island. From east to west, the entire crack is 20 kilometers long, completely dividing the entire island. This island will undoubtedly gradually form 2 islands with the passage of time, and will be divided into 2 from now on. At this time, warship. On the deck. Seeing Drake's embarrassed figure fleeing in panic, Bart has only come back to his senses until now. He quickly suppressed the shock in his heart and shouted in the direction of Lu En. Colonel Lu En, the traitor is going to run away. The loud voice resounded everywhere. Drake ran faster. He even wished he had 2 more legs to escape. Finally, he jumped up and jumped onto a fishing boat. Then, he held the oars tightly with both hands, gritted his teeth, and slid the oars hard. It was just an ordinary fishing boat, but Drake rowed it at a speed comparable to that of a yacht. Run, run. It's not hard to see. Drake was already scared out of his wits. Lu En has become Drake's biggest psychological shadow. I guess in this life, Drake will never forget it. Today, the shocking scene of Lu En splitting the entire island with one knife. He will never be able to erase this deep memory for the rest of his life. Hulala, in an instant, Drake drove the fishing boat to the sea, and disappeared from the coast of this port in a blink of an eye, and the endless sea in the distance gradually disappeared. Seeing this, Bart and other Marines looked at each other in astonishment. Good guy. With such a technical job, why don't you do some serious business and become a pirate? It's a waste of talent. According to Drake's rowing speed, he could earn tens of thousands of berries salary just by rowing. Isn't that good? He has to be a pirate, right? If he really did some serious business, with Drake's skills, he would have made a fortune and become a well-known businessman in the sea. What a pity. Drake has taken the wrong path. The sea will also lose a rich man in the future. After a while, Lu En glanced at the direction where Drake fled calmly, and did not pay much attention to his intentions, and returned to the warship. He casually threw the samurai sword in his hand to Bart. The latter was tense, and took the samurai sword carefully, holding it in his palm. It seemed that what he held was not an ordinary samurai sword, but his heirloom. After all, this is the samurai sword that split the entire island. Bart had reason to think he should collect this samurai sword as heirloom. In time, this samurai sword will become a priceless treasure. At that time, you can brag to outsiders. This samurai sword in our hand. It once accompanied Colonel Lu En for a period of time. Colonel Lu En, aren't we going to capture the Marine traitor? Just let him run away? Suppressing the many complicated thoughts in his mind, Bart asked in confusion. With such a great opportunity, shouldn't we take down the Marine traitor? Don't worry about him. Lu En waved his hand without much explanation, and changed the subject. The most urgent task is for you to dispatch some people to land on Pinglu Island, go straight to Wonglong, and capture the person in charge of the slave camp on Pinglu Island and detain him. Hearing this, Bart was eager to try. But his expression was a little hesitant. As the slave camp built by Don Quixote family in North Blue, I am worried that there are many pirates responsible for guarding slaves. With only our current manpower, I am afraid it is not enough to capture these pirates. Not to mention, to capture their leaders. Facing Bart's inner concerns, Lu En smiled faintly. He motioned to the other party to prick up his ears. Didn't you hear it? Bart was at a loss. Please tell me, Colonel Lu En. Lu En. Listen carefully. Didn't you hear the fierce trembling sounds coming from Pinglu Island? This means that there are people fighting inside, and the number of people involved in the battle is very large. If I guess correctly, the knife I just used not only split the island. Even the warehouses and cages where slaves are held on the island were split open by my knife. At this moment, the pirates of Don Quixote family must be having a headache facing the counterattack from the slaves. They are already busy with their own affairs. In this case, it is the best time for you to come out to maintain order. Lead the slaves to defeat this group of pirates and arrest their leaders. After speaking, Lu En found his own chair and sat down heavily. He put on his sunglasses again and stopped making too many comments on Bart's next actions. He just had to leave it to him to take full responsibility. If he can't even do this little thing well, it can only mean that Bart, the Marine Major, is just a pure idiot with a false reputation. Picking up the glass on the wooden table next to him, Lu En tasted the sweet and delicious drink. He looked comfortable. After listening to Lu En's explanation, Bart suddenly realized. He immediately dispatched a group of Marine elites. A total of about 40 Marines were summoned. Basically all of them are Marine veterans and elites. As for Marine recruits, they are naturally not qualified to participate in them, so as not to become a burden. Once the battle breaks out, who will care about these Marine recruits? These recruits have not undergone rigorous training. Once they go to the battlefield, they are really a pure burden. It's okay if they can't help. The most feared thing is that these recruits will be scared to death on the battlefield, and they will fall to the ground and become live targets. Without rigorous training, most of them will be at a loss when they participate in the battle for the first time, and their combat power can only be exerted about 30% to 40%. Only a few talented people who are born with a strong mentality can still exert their full combat power even if it is their first time to participate in a battle. But the number of such talented people is too rare. Let's go. Follow me to capture the person in charge of the slave trade. Seeing the group of elite Marines summoned, Bart couldn't wait to give orders. Chapter 41. Is it possible that the great swordsman is in front of you? 3 more chapters? Soon. A group of Marines, armed with weapons, landed on Pingshi Island with great fanfare and rushed to the battlefield area in the center of the island. Along the way, along the terrifying crack that split the entire island by a knife, Bart led 40 elite Marines and finally arrived at the scene of the battle after a while. At this time, the battlefield was in chaos. There were sounds of fighting everywhere. Corpses were everywhere. Blood flowed like a river. The battle was very fierce. Both sides fought in full swing. Waves of screams from the battlefield resounded through the sky. One by one, they fell to the ground, wailing miserably and screaming in pain. Even without the intervention of Bart and other Marines, the pirates on the Don Quixote family side had already retreated step by step, and the defeat was inevitable. Seeing this, Bart's heart was immediately relieved. He thought with excitement on his face. Sure enough, Colonel Lu En was right. Now is the best time for Marine to enter the battlefield and capture the person in charge of the slave trading camp. If he was a step later, the other party would be beaten to death by this group of angry slaves. Go. Bart's blood was boiling. He immediately took out the samurai sword on his waist. He led the way and rushed forward. He rushed directly into the center of the battlefield. Bart showed the style of Major Marine in the battlefield. Then, the dozens of Marine elites following Bart did not lag behind too much, and they all jumped into the battlefield to fight. Kill. With the intervention of Bart and other Marines, the pirates on the Don Quixote family side were defeated even faster. In the end, Marine was unharmed, and only paid the price of 11 people suffering minor injuries to defeat the pirates in the Don Quixote family camp. This battle was a great victory. According to the statistics after the war, the pirates killed by the slaves in revenge are not included. On the Marine side alone, a total of 80 to 90 pirates were killed. There were not many pirate captives, and it can even be said that there were very few. After all, this group of slaves who have been imprisoned and tortured for a long time, once they are angry and retaliate, they will naturally not care whether the other party surrenders or not, and treat them as mortal enemies. After the battle, Bart did not have the idea of arresting these captives for imprisonment. He just followed the order issued by Lu En, took away the main person in charge of the slave trade, Stat, and led a group of Marine elites to leave the battlefield. As for the remaining captives, if nothing unexpected happens, they will definitely face the inhumane torture of this group of angry slaves. All the things that have been imposed on the slaves will be returned tenfold and 100-fold. In addition, because there are too many slaves here, Bart also has no idea of taking over these slaves and properly settling them all. At most, we can inform the Naval Headquarters and let the senior management of Marine Corps deal with these issues. We have done our best to this extent. Half an hour later, Bart led 40 elite Marines back along the same route. There were the same number of people when they went out, and there were the same number of people when they came back, and no Marine died. The only extra person was Stat, the person in charge of the slave trade, who was captured by Bart himself according to Lu En's order. The group returned to the warship. Everyone had a little fatigue on their faces and a lot of bloodline on their bodies. But everyone could not hide their excitement. Colonel Lu En, the person in charge of the slave trade you want to capture, has been brought back. Bart grabbed Stat's neck and walked all the way to Lu En. Stat was no longer as elegant as before. His body was covered with broken scars, his hair was messy, his clothes were tattered, and his whole face was red and swollen, making it difficult to see his original mental state. At this time, he looked ashen and had no desire to live. He was captured by the Marine and knew that he had no way to survive. What he did was too bad in both specification and nature. Once caught, the only fate is to be killed on the spot or to be sent to impel down for life. So, just break the jar and throw it away. A dead pig is not afraid of boiling water. The worst thing is death. What's there to be afraid of? If you are not afraid of death, what else is there to be afraid of? With such thoughts, Stat raised his head angrily, his eyes were red and bloodshot, and he looked miserable and ferocious. He gritted his teeth and shouted with anger and unwillingness. If it weren't for Terry, who was unfortunately killed instantly by a mysterious and terrifying swordsman. You Marines would never catch me, it's even more impossible to destroy our base camp. If it weren't for that unidentified swordsman, for some unknown reason, he suddenly attacked Pinglu Island. And, with a shocking slash, he forcibly split the entire Pinglu Island. Just relying on a few crooked melons and cracked dates from you Marines, don't even think about trying to destroy everything on the island. I won't accept it. Stat was indignant. Until now, he still didn't think that he lost to Marine. He just firmly believed. He lost to the unknown swordsman who split the entire island with one sword. That's all. It was completely reasonable to lose to a swordsman of that level. North Blue, how could such a terrifying swordsman appear? A swordsman of this level who can cut the entire island with one sword should not appear in North Blue. Even if you look at the whole world, there are only a handful of swordsmen with such a strong swordsmanship level. Even as strong as the legendary world's #1 swordsman Haki Mahawk, his swordsmanship level is only this level, right? Why did this monster appear in North Blue? Why did he suddenly cut a stunning sword against Pingshima? Stat gritted his teeth, his throat rolled, and he roared hysterically. However, his unwilling remarks were like the howling of a defeated dog. Instead of making Bart and the other Marines angry, they all cast strange and amusing glances at Stat. Looking at Stat's almost crazy and angry look, Bart wanted to laugh but was trying hard to hold back his laughter, and his facial features became a little distorted. After a while, when Stat had almost vented his anger, Bart held back his laughter and spoke. Tell me, is there such a possibility? The unknown great swordsman you mentioned. The great swordsman who forcibly split the entire island with one sword. He is standing in front of you right now. Chapter 42. Dover is shocked. The two families attack with their entire forces. 1/10 First Order required. As Bart finished speaking, originally, Don Quixote family civilian cadre Stat, whose eyes were full of anger and unwillingness, couldn't help but widen his eyes, his pupils shrank, and his face was out of control. He subconsciously lost his voice. Impossible. Looking at Bart in front of him, and then looking at the Marines around him. Finally, Stat's eyes were fixed on the young boy in front of him who was wearing a Marine Colonel uniform and was only 15 or 16 years old at most. Absolutely impossible. Stat lost his voice again and again. He obviously couldn't accept the shocking truth given by Bart. The mysterious swordsman whose swordsmanship level was comparable to the world's #1 swordsman Haki, the swordsman who split the entire island with one sword and cut off a 20-kilometer island with one sword. How could it be a boy of only 15 or 16 years old? Stat's worldview was greatly shocked. He could never imagine that a boy of 15 or 16 had swordsmanship comparable to the best in the world. What kind of monster is this? You must be lying to me. I won't believe your Marine's lies. Even if you want to lie, I advise you to find a convincing reason. A boy of 15 or 16 would be the world-class swordsman who split the entire island with one sword. What a joke. Stater suppressed his shock and still appeared very stubborn verbally. Believe it or not. Anyway, there is no need for us to force you to accept this fact. Bart shrugged, not caring. He didn't have to make the other party accept this result. Since the other party couldn't accept it, let him be. Anyway, it wouldn't have any impact on their Marine. Just a prisoner. There are only two ways to face the fate that will come next. Either be executed directly or be sent to impel down for imprisonment. From now on, it will never be possible to make waves in this sea again. Take him down and imprison him. Lu En spoke slowly. Yes. Bart nodded. Then, he personally escorted Stat, who was slumped on the ground, to a place on the warship specially designed to hold prisoners. Along the way, Stat was incoherent, as if he was mentally disturbed. This is impossible, it must be fake. How could there be such a terrifying monster in this sea? Even the legendary world's #1 swordsman Haki, at such an age, could not have such a strong swordsmanship level. That 15 or 16-year-old monster boy, his swordsmanship talent is higher than Haki. It is not difficult to see that even if Stat tried his best to deny it in his heart. But the shocking truth brought by Bart, it still caused him a huge mental shock. It made it difficult for him to remain calm, gradually. His inner belief seemed to be shaken. What if it's really him? The great swordsman who cut off the entire island with one sword, if it's really that boy. What does this mean? When he thought of this, Stat's throat was dry and he couldn't help swallowing. Monster. That boy is very likely an unprecedented monster. Unprecedented. There has never been such an example. Beside him, seeing Stat's mental disorder, Bart shook his head secretly. Only one crazy person. Escorted the other party to the cage of the warship for imprisonment, and then returned to the deck by the same route. Tell the staff to prepare to return. Lu En looked at Bart returning to the deck, and gave him an order. The mission to go to sea this time is over. The rest is up to you to handle. Don't disturb me if there is nothing important, I'll sleep for a while. Yes. Bart's response. Lu En casually picked up a straw hat to cover his face, lay on the chair, crossed his legs and rested on the fence of the warship deck, closed his eyes slightly, and rested quietly. Seeing this, Bart even became more cautious in his movements. He immediately ordered his men, pull up the anchor. And set sail again. Set sail. The helmsman took the helm, and the navigator began to observe the sky and plan the sailing route. The Marines soon became busy in their respective duties. Hulala, the warship pushed away the calm sea surface, causing ripples and waves. Slowly moving away from the port coast of Pingshi Island. Until it completely disappeared in this sea area. The warship left. Only this island split in half was left. With the passage of time, it will sooner or later form two adjacent islands. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, time came to the afternoon. The sun set. The golden afterglow of the setting sun falls on the sea. The waves sparkle. The dazzling golden light shines like gold on the sea. Accompanied by the breeze, the sea current hits the port coast of Pinglu Island. The reefs on the shore have been washed by the sea again and again, and they are already riddled with holes. The reefs have been worn away by time, leaving behind an extremely strong breath of time. Suddenly, a sailboat came from the distant sea. The sailboat is not large in scale, and can probably carry about 200 to 300 people. And on the flag hoisted high on the sailboat, there is an extremely eye-catching skull. This is a pirate ship. The pirate ship is approaching the direction of Pinglu Island. The sea breeze blows the skull flag. On the deck of the pirate ship, there are about 10 to 20 pirates standing, and the number of prisoners is not too large. But everyone exudes an extremely strong and fierce aura. They are all obviously powerful people with good strength, not those ugly people with a bounty of only a few million berry. And their clothes are relatively uniform, all in suits, looking very neat. It seems that they all come from the same force. Baloo Baloo, the Den Den Mushi in his hand suddenly made a unique sound, and a tall and thin middle-aged man in the lead slowly took out the Den Den Mushi to connect. What's going on? Why didn't the person in charge of Pinglu Island answer my call? Did they betray the Don Quixote family? Did they want to set up their own business? Or did a huge disaster happen on Shukan Island? There was a burst of angry questioning from the phone. The middle-aged man holding the Den Den Mushi's face tightened, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He looked terrified and explained hesitantly. Young master, we have arrived at Pinglu Island to check, please wait a moment. Wait until we find out the truth, and then convey the truth to you. Yes. The voice that questioned the Den Den Mushi was from Doflamingo, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. The boss of the Don Quixote family, one of the kings of the Dark World. There had been no movement on Pink Island for about half a day, so it was inevitable that Doflamingo would pay special attention. He immediately sent nearby personnel to Pink Island to find out the reason. The slave trade on Pink Island is the largest slave exchange established by the Don Quixote family in North Blue. Once there is a slight mistake here, the loss to the Don Quixote family is too painful. Doflamingo will never allow this to happen. For some reason, Doflamingo always has an ominous premonition. Soon, the pirate ship successfully arrived at the port coast of Pink Island. The middle-aged man holding the Den Den Mushi led a dozen members of the Don Quixote family to jump off the deck and land on Pink Island. However, just as they were about to start the investigation, at the moment of landing on Pinglu Island, all the Don Quixote family cadres, including the middle-aged man, could not help but gasp. They looked at the hideous crack left on Pinglu Island with horror, shock and disbelief. This hideous crack extended from the port coast to the end of the island. It was bottomless. Like an abyss. All the members of Don Quixote family were shocked and speechless for a moment. Shocked, horrified, terrified, countless emotions surged into their hearts in an instant. More than a dozen members of Don Quixote family stared blankly at the crack that ran through the entire island, feeling a chill rising from the soles of their feet to their heads, shuddering and shivering. Is it true? The middle-aged man was the first to come to his senses, but his shocked mood was slow to calm down. He walked forward. He squatted down and carefully checked the depth of the crack. He faintly heard the sound of the sea current coming from underground. He took another breath of cold air. His mind was shocked. It was obvious that the entire island was split open. Natural disaster? He had this thought at the first time. However, after the subsequent investigation, he immediately overturned this idea. He felt an unimaginable terrifying sword energy from this crack. The sharp sword energy remained in the crack and did not dissipate for a long time. Sword energy? When the middle-aged man noticed this clue, he was more and more shocked. He couldn't help but blurt out, "This crack that runs through the entire island was actually caused by humans? There's an unimaginable great swordsman who split the entire island with one sword. Monster, monster." Hearing this, more than a dozen Don Quixote family members around him lost their voices. How is it possible? The diameter of this island is as long as 20 kilometers. How could someone be so powerful? Even the world's #1 swordsman Haki doesn't have such a strong swordsmanship level, right? With a sense of shock in their hearts, the group walked along the crack into the island. As they walked along, the shock in their hearts became stronger and stronger. The length of the crack extended farther and farther. Until, from the east coast of Pinglu Island, they arrived at the west coast of Pinglu Island. Coming here, they finally saw the end of this terrifying crack. This crack seemed to completely penetrate the entire island. From east to west, it split the entire Pinglu Island in half. Split in two. This shocking truth was in front of them, causing all Don Quixote family members to accept this horrifying truth even if they could not accept it in their hearts. Tet. The whole island was split from east to west by a knife. How could North Blue have such a terrifying swordsman? He is as strong as a monster. Could it be that the legendary world's #1 swordsman Haki happened to pass by North Blue? Everyone was horrified. Then, they forced themselves to ignore this crack that ran through the entire island, and began to get to the point, heading to the slave warehouse for investigation in the exact direction. Finally, after arriving at the scene, they were horrified to find that the slave warehouse had been completely destroyed. Countless bodies were left on the ground, all of which were the bodies of the security guards who were responsible for guarding the slave warehouse. As for the slaves in the warehouse, almost all of them ran away. Not one was left. All the slaves fled. This result made the Don Quixote family members who were in charge of the investigation feel numb. They dared not imagine how cruel the blame from the young master Doflamingo would be. They dialed the Den Den Mushi with their heads held high. Pop, 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 very quickly, the Den Den Mushi dialed. Doflamingo's voice came out. Speak. The middle-aged man suppressed his fear and uneasiness and told the truth. Young master. All the slaves imprisoned on the island have run away. The security guards responsible for guarding the slaves on the island have all died. And, after a pause, he did not dare to continue. Doflamingo fell silent. For a long time. Doflamingo then released his anger and roared. What did you say? All the slaves ran away. That was the largest slave warehouse built by the family in North Blue. Do you know how much loss this will cause the family? Besides that, how do you want me to explain to those forces that have already reserved slaves with the family? None of them is easy to mess with. Are you going to let the family go back on their word? Wouldn't this make the family's reputation in the dark world infamous? From now on, no force will be willing to cooperate with us? You deserve to die. After roaring, Doflamingo regained some sanity. He asked in a low voice. Who did it? The middle-aged man hurriedly replied. After my subordinate's investigation, there may be two parties. One is Marine. The other is an unknown great swordsman. When mentioning this great swordsman, the middle-aged man's voice trembled slightly. This great swordsman. He split the entire Hiroshima island with one sword. He forcibly split the island with a diameter of 20 kilometers into two. Today, the crack that divides the entire island still retains extremely amazing sword energy. It extends from the eastern coast of the island all the way to the end of the western coast. After speaking, Doflamingo on the opposite side was silent again. You just said, an unknown swordsman split an island with a diameter of 20 kilometers with one sword? Do you know what this means? Even if you look at the entire New World, there are only a few people whose swordsmanship has reached such a terrifying level. They can be counted on one hand. Even Doflamingo, who is as strong as one of the 7 warlords of the sea, was inevitably shocked by the news from his subordinates. As a great pirate in the New World, and one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Doflamingo certainly knows. The swordsman who can split an island with a diameter of 20 kilometers with one sword, what kind of terrifying strong man is the opponent? Even if Doflamingo faces a swordsman of this level, he doesn't have much chance of winning. North Blue, how could such a terrifying monster appear? Doflamingo took a deep breath. He felt a headache. Is it Haki? But some time ago, news of Haki's appearance came from East Blue. How come Haki ran to North Blue in just a blink of an eye? Doflamingo was puzzled. If it wasn't Haki, which other great swordsman in this sea could have such a terrible swordsmanship level? Suppressing all the complicated thoughts in his mind, since he couldn't figure out the identity of the mysterious great swordsman, Doflamingo could only temporarily vent all the anger that had been accumulated in his heart on Marine. Marine, you again. The slave base camp of North Blue Pinglu Island was destroyed by Marine, which brought huge losses to Don Quixote family, selected to exceed the losses of previous arms transactions by dozens or even hundreds of times. This has seriously shaken the business industry chain of Don Quixote family. After hanging up the phone, with an extremely angry mood in his heart, Doflamingo immediately dialed the communication of Diamante, one of the highest cadres of the family. At this time, Diamante was in North Blue. After a while, the communication was connected. Young master? Diamante's voice came from the phone. Then, Doflamingo roared at Den Den Mushi. Now, immediately. Send me some people to destroy the Marine branch. Chapter 43 Raid. The war has begun. Seek help from Sengoku, First Order on 2/10. Diamante, who was briefly stunned by Doflamingo's roar, quickly came back to his senses. Although he didn't know why his young master was so angry, Diamante quickly responded. Young master, don't worry, I am now leading 800 men from North Blue. Together with the 1,200 fully modernized clone soldiers dispatched by the Vinsmoke family, they will soon arrive at Mushroom Town. With the marine combat power of the North Blue Marine branch, it can't stop our attack at all. Quote. But, young master, should we kill Marine? Diamante hesitated. Although Marine's dominance in North Blue is far less than that of the Vinsmoke family, the king of North Blue, but in grand line, Marine is the absolute ruler. Once Marine is irritated, Diamante is worried. This will have a very bad impact on the countless subsequent industries of their Don Quixote family. When Marine launches a retaliatory action, their family's industry will inevitably continue to shrink. Relying on the power of the Don Quixote family alone, want to confront Marine head-on? This is obviously not qualified. Kill them hard. Don't worry about the consequences. Quote, don't worry about causing too bad an impact. If Marine wants to go to war, we will accompany him to the end. Since Marine has done something that breaks the rules, don't blame us for falling out. Doflamingo was furious. He and Marine had an agreement. Marine had turned a blind eye to some of the things he did. Now, Marine had obviously fallen out. Doflamingo didn't need to worry too much. Meanwhile, North Blue. There was a sea area less than 10 nautical miles away from the north of Mushroom Town. A total of 5 huge pirate ships were slowly sailing on the sea. These 5 pirate ships were approaching Mushroom Town in a clear direction. On one of the pirate ships, Diamante hung up the call. He frowned. In the communication with his young master just now, he keenly noticed that his young master's mood was not right. Like he was too angry. Why? Did the family have another accident in the industry? Or was it planned by Marine? Otherwise, why would the young master be so angry? Marine was so angry, he even threatened to kill them all? This was completely different from the young master's previous style of doing things. In the past, he had to take Marine's face into consideration and did not dare to take too extreme and bad actions against Marine. But this time, he became reckless. Forget it. Since the young master has given the order, I don't need to think so much. Just obey the young master's order. Diamante shook his head and stopped dwelling on this issue. Turning around, he looked at the entire pirate ship, where nearly 400 pirates were ready to go, and he smiled with satisfaction. These 400 pirates and the other 4 pirates on the 10 pirate ships next to them. They are all subordinate forces that Don Quixote family has painstakingly built in North Blue. A total of 800 pirates, from 2 different pirate groups, as one of the forces under the Don Quixote family, responded to the call. Diamante just gave an order, and the 2 pirate groups immediately responded and came to obey Diamante's orders. Established a cooperative relationship with the Vinsmoke family. The family mobilized 800 pirates, and the Vinsmoke family also mobilized 1,200 clone soldiers. A total of 2,000 people, let alone destroying a marine branch in North Blue. Even destroying a marine branch in Grand Line is definitely more than enough. Diamante thought. This time, both the Don Quixote family and the Vinsmoke family have obviously made a big move. This is the first time such a large-scale action has been taken against Marine. It's less than 5 nautical miles away from Mushroom Town. Almost. Diamante looked at the distant sea. Indistinctly, he seemed to have seen an island appear at the end of the sea ahead. On the other side, the 1,200 clone soldiers, led by Yangzi, the youngest son of the Vinsmoke family, are ready to go. They are fully armed and well equipped, carrying the technological weapons developed by the Vinsmoke family. Is the Mushroom Town ahead? Yangzi smiled grimly when he saw an island appearing on the sea ahead. He waved his hand. All troops, listen to my order, fire hard, bomb it. Mushroom Town. The port coast. Pedestrians come and go in an endless stream, and it is very lively. Many merchant ships are docked at the shore, and the workers are busy unloading. Tourist boats are getting on and off passengers. There are also some fishing boats that have just returned, catching a large number of fish with fishing nets and putting them on the ground of the port for an open sale. The whole port looks lively. The unloading workers who have just finished their work are looking up and wiping the sweat from their foreheads, but they suddenly notice it with a glance. Pirate ships sailing from the distant sea. The high-hanging skull flag was clearly visible, causing the unloading officer to be greatly shocked. His face turned pale, and his heart was filled with fear and anxiety. Yes, it's a pirate. Pirates are coming, run. Accompanied by a scream, in an instant, the whole port became a mess. Noisy. Various screams rang out one after another. It even caused a stampede. Some unlucky people were pushed down and had to endure the trampling of others, almost losing half their lives. The port, which originally seemed peaceful, became extremely chaotic in an instant. Everyone was fleeing the coast in panic, and even threw away all the goods on hand. Go and inform the Marine. Pirates are coming. Some people who kept a certain degree of rationality shouted hurriedly. Before the tourist boats docked at the port could leave, the passengers on the boats fled in panic, fled from the tourist boats, returned to the port of Mushroom Town, and fled from the edge of the coast with the tide. In less than a few minutes, the port changed from the initial bustle and noise to a deserted and silent place. Many goods were left at the port, at this moment. The only thought was to escape. These goods would naturally be abandoned by people without hesitation. At this moment, whoosh, 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 sharp and piercing sounds of breaking through the air sounded one after another. I saw. Black shells fell from the sky. 5 pirate ships, thousands of meters away from the port of Mushroom Town, had already aimed their artillery fire at Mushroom Town and carried out a covering bombing. Boom. 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 Black round shells attacked from the sea thousands of meters away in a parabola, hitting the buildings in the area near the port of Mushroom Town one after another. The loud noise of the shells exploding was deafening. The shock waves from the shells destroyed a group of buildings. Boom. Many old buildings collapsed on the spot. The port covered by artillery fire had cracks on the ground, and there were cracks and deep pits like spider webs everywhere. Crack. Crack. The port was close to the edge of the sea, and the ground collapsed directly, and the king merged into the minister of the sea. Some of the houses of the residents living near the port were hit by shells. The walls cracked on the spot, and broken pieces of the wall slid down from the air. Pedestrians fled in panic on the spacious streets of the town. The artillery fire had burned the entire mushroom town. The war covered the port. In a short period of time, the port was riddled with holes and devastated by the bombardment of artillery fire. Smoke and dust rose. The pungent smell brought by the artillery fire filled the air in this area. The many goods originally placed in the port, as well as the merchant ships, tourist ships, fishing boats, etc. docked at the port, were inevitably hit by the shells and exploded on the spot, with countless wood chips flying all over the sky. In an instant, most of the objects in the port were destroyed beyond recognition. One ship after another was sunk directly, and scattered into countless wood chips and sank into the sea. At the same time, when countless residents fled in panic, the news that Mushroom Town was attacked by pirates was naturally conveyed to the Marine branch as soon as possible. What? A pirate group attacked our Mushroom Town? Colonel Karen learned the news as soon as possible, and immediately stood up in shock, his face full of anger. At that moment, he quickly dispatched the personnel in the Marine branch. Quick! Gather now, all Marines, gather quickly. Under Caron's order, all Marines of the Marine branch of Mushroom Town came to gather. Among them, there are also recruits who have just joined the Marine for less than 2 days, or even just started to get in touch with the Marine training. They also heard the news and came, and were pulled into the team. Half a quarter of an hour later, Lieutenant Colonel Moderson led the Marine to come. So far, all the Marines of the Mushroom Town Marine branch have been assembled. There are about 430 Marines in total, among them. About 170 people are recruits who have just joined the Marine. We can't expect them to have too strong combat power. It's a blessing that they don't drag their feet. And the remaining 260 or so people are all elite veterans of the Marine. Although they can't be said to have experienced hundreds of battles, they have at least participated in several life and death battles with pirates, and they can be regarded as experienced. All the Marines were assembled smoothly, and led by Colonel Karen and Lieutenant Colonel Moderson, they immediately rushed to the direction of the Mushroom Town port coast with great fanfare. Prepare to block the pirates' attack from the front. More than 400 Marines were ready to go, each holding a weapon, following the footsteps of Karen and Moderson, and hurried to the port. Can I finally show my skills? The reason why I first joined Marine is to make achievements. Are you all not afraid? Why am I a little scared? Coward. Marine recruits have different mentalities. The veterans did not have too much pressure and seemed to be relaxed. I didn't expect that there were still pirates who were not afraid of death and dared to openly attack Mushroom Town. This is the first time in the past 10 years that there have been such bold pirates. The group arrived at the port smoothly. When Karen, Moderson, and the Marines behind them looked up, they saw the 5 pirate ships attacking from the distant sea. Suddenly, the heat in everyone's heart was directly extinguished by a basin of cold water. 5 pirate ships. Karen stared blankly at the 5 pirate ships, each of which was carrying a large number of pirates. Each pirate ship carries at least 300 or 400 people. Doesn't this mean that there are no less than 2,000 pirates on these 5 pirate ships? Caron's heart trembled. The total number of Marines in the entire Mushroom Town Marine branch is no more than 500. They are going to face more than 4 times the number of enemies at once. Besides, among the more than 400 Marines, about 1/3 of them are recruiters, and they cannot be expected to contribute much combat power. In this way, each elite Marine needs to face 5 or even 6 times the number of pirates. Can they win? Even Karen is not optimistic about the severe situation they are facing. But he can't show it. He is the highest commander of the Mushroom Town Marine branch. If even he shows timidity, let alone other Marines. Colonel Karen, they seem to be from the Don Quixote family and the Vinsmoke family. Moderson keenly observed some clues. He analyzed in a low voice, I saw Diamante, one of the highest officials of the Don Quixote family, a pirate with a bounty of over 100 million. And the Vinsmoke family. It seems that the youngest son of the family, Vinsmoke Yongzi, was dispatched. Hearing this, Caron's pupils shrank. He hurriedly looked at the 5 pirate ships in the sea ahead. As expected, he also saw the highest official of the Don Quixote family in Yongzi, the youngest son of the Vinsmoke family. It turned out to be them. Karen clenched his fists, furious. Don Quixote family and Vinsmoke family have joined forces to launch a revenge operation against our Mushroom Town Marine branch? For Kizaru Admiral's previous reminder, he obviously still remembers it in his mind. But he didn't expect the people of the Don Quixote family and Vinsmoke family would be so crazy. They directly dispatched a full 2,000 people to raid the Mushroom Town Marine branch. Completely torn apart. Are we going to go to war with the Marines? The trouble is that Colonel Lu En happened to be out on a mission. Karen looked grim. These 5 pirate ships are obviously from the Don Quixote family and the Vinsmoke family. Colonel Karen, do we need to ask Marshal Sengoku for help? Let the Marshal send Marine from nearby waters to reinforce. To be realistic, With our current manpower, I'm afraid we can't stop the raid of these pirates at all. Moderson suggested. Even if we mobilize nearby marines to reinforce, it's too late. Karen took a deep breath. He quickly took out the Den Den Mushi and dialed the communication from the Naval Headquarters. Soon, the Den Den Mushi was connected. Good money, Zhao. I'm Sengoku. Sengoku's voice came from the Den Den Mushi. Marshal Sengoku. I'm Colonel Karen of the Marine Branch of North Blue Mushroom Town. Now, we are facing a joint attack by the Don Quixote family and the Vinsmoke family. A total of 2,000 attacking pirates. Mushroom Town is in urgent need of reinforcements. Karen told the truth. What? Don Quixote family and Vinsmoke family? They are so bold that they dared to openly defy the dignity of the Marine? They even openly attacked the Marine branch? What a big courage! Sengoku was shocked and angry. After a pause, he quickly comforted, calm down first. I will immediately mobilize the Marines in the nearby waters to rush to reinforce. You hold on for a while. In addition, I will put pressure on Doflamingo and Judge to let them immediately order the withdrawal of these pirates. Since Doflamingo and Judge have deliberately mobilized so many pirates to attack, they are obviously determined. It is unlikely that they will change their original decision because of Sengoku's pressure. So, Sengoku's words can only be used to appease Karen. Where is Lu En? Sengoku suddenly thought of something and asked immediately. Colonel Lu En went out to sea to perform a mission, but he should be back soon, right? Karen looked confused. Then there is no way. Sengoku sighed. If this kid is still there, he may be able to stop the Don Quixote family and the Vinsmoke clan. Song Neng can let you hold on for 10 times first. Hanging up the Den Den Mushi, Kuron's face was heavy. Moderson and the Marine behind him also had a gloomy face. From now on, we can only rely on ourselves, Karen solemnly ordered. We must hold on until Colonel Lu En returns. When Colonel Lu En returns, no matter if it is the people of the Don Quixote family or the people of the Vinsmoke family, they will no longer pose any threat. Then, it will be the time to settle accounts with them completely. At the moment when the flames of war filled Mushroom Town, the communication from Sengoku was also dialed to Lu En. Chapter 44. Sengoku's urgent message. Finally arrived. Lu En shows up, first order on 3/10. Pop pop pop. At this time, a warship was sailing towards Mushroom Town. On the deck, Lu En, wearing a marine uniform, lay on the chair and took out the Den Den Mushi. Who? He asked lazily. I'm Sengoku. A serious voice came from the phone. Marshal Sengoku. Lu En was surprised. He asked curiously, Marshal Sengoku, what do you want to talk to me about? Mushroom Town was attacked by a large number of pirates. The attackers were pirates sent by the Don Quixote family and the Vinsmoke family. A total of 2,000 people. Mushroom Town is already in danger, and you need to return to Mushroom Town as soon as possible for support. It must be as soon as possible. Sengoku's tone was full of anxiety. Don Quixote family and Vinsmoke family? They attacked Mushroom Town? Lu En figured it out quickly. The revenge of these two families would come so quickly. Dared to openly attack the Marine branch of Mushroom Town. No wonder Sengoku is so anxious. The situation is not optimistic. Where are you now? How long will it take to reach Mushroom Town? I'll try to find Doflamingo and Judge to delay the time. Sengoku said. Although this was only a small marine branch of North Blue that was attacked, the Don Quixote family and Vinsmoke family joined forces to carry out such a blatant revenge, which made Sengoku have to pay special attention. Soon. Lu En looked at the blue sea in the distance through his sunglasses, estimating how far away from Mushroom Town he was. Beside him, Bart whispered a reminder. Colonel Lu En, if the warship goes at full speed, it will take about 10 minutes to reach Mushroom Town. Lu En then relayed Bart's words to Sengoku. 10 minutes? They should be able to hold on for another 10 minutes. A moment later, the communication was disconnected. Lu En slowly got up from his chair and walked to the edge of the deck's fence, staring quietly at the endless sea ahead. Beside him, Bart couldn't help asking impatiently, Colonel, Mushroom Town was attacked by 2,000 pirates at once? What should we do? The number of Marines in the Marine branch of Mushroom Town is only about 400 or 500. I'm afraid that they alone can't resist the attack of such a large number of pirates. Speaking of this, his tone was full of anger. Don Quixote family is too bold, and there is also Vinsmoke family. They dared to openly attack our Marine branch in Mushroom Town. Do they want to go to war with Marine? Lu En. Help me see what time it is now. Bart replied. Around 5:30 in the afternoon. That should be enough. We will arrive at Mushroom Town in 20 minutes before 6 o'clock. It should not be a problem to get rid of these pirates within 20 minutes. Therefore, there is no such trouble as overtime. Lu En looked relaxed. Sengoku, who was in Marineford, was in the Marshal's office. He frowned at the moment, his eyes suppressed his intentions. Then, he picked up the phone and dialed. Soon, the communication was connected. A slightly gentle voice came from the Den Den Mushi. Marshal Sengoku. It's really rare. The dignified Marshal of Marine would actually contact me, a notorious pirate. I wonder what Marshal Sengoku wants to do by contacting me. This person is Doflamingo. Doflamingo, I am now solemnly warning you. Stop your current dangerous behavior immediately. All the pirates of your Don Quixote family leave Mushroom Town. Exit North Blue. Sengoku scolded. Fu. Marshal Sengoku, what are you talking about? I don't understand at all. What dangerous behavior? I don't remember that the pirates under my command have ever been to North Blue, let alone the so-called Mushroom Town. 1. Doflamingo laughed strangely. So, Marshal Sengoku, I'm afraid I can't fulfill your request. It's a fabricated thing, how can you let me take this responsibility? Hearing this, Sengoku's forehead veins bulged, and his eyes were full of anger. Dealing with this group of insidious and cunning pirates every day can be said to make him feel physically and mentally exhausted. Are you going to go to war with Marine? Sengoku questioned. Don't make it sound so serious. Marine is not in a good situation right now. There are countless pirates setting sail every day in this sea. On the other hand, Marine is in a period of transition. Otherwise, Marine would not withdraw from the policy of 7 warlords of the sea. Isn't it because these pirates have no time to take care of the sea that we need 7 warlords of the sea, 7 powerful and influential pirates, to help you Marine maintain order in this sea? Marshal Sengoku, you have to understand one thing. It's not that we 7 warlords of the sea need you Marine, but on the contrary, it's you Marine who can't do without the help of Shichibukai. War? Is Marshal Sengoku sure that he will choose to go to war with Shichibukai for a small Marine branch? Doflamingo seemed to have grasped Sengoku's psychology. After a pause, his tone was a little cold. Besides, I haven't blamed you Marines yet, but you blame me instead. In the past few years, I and you Marines have kept to ourselves and have not interfered with each other. But recently, JFD, you Marines have been madly targeting me and Don Quixote family. First, they destroyed our arms trade. Even the largest industrial chain built by our Don Quixote family in North Blue was destroyed. Our entire family has suffered unprecedented business losses. Now, I'm just teaching you Marines a little lesson. After not getting along with Doflamingo, Sengoku hung up the call angrily. Next, he called the Vinsmoke family again, unexpectedly. The head of the Vinsmoke family didn't even want to answer the call. Sengoku was even more angry. He wanted to go to North Blue in person and use the Great Buddha fruit to turn the Vinsmoke family upside down. You two don't take Marines seriously, right? Okay. Just you wait. Sengoku gritted his teeth. He only hoped now Lu En could return to Mushroom Town as soon as possible. Then, give those pirates a hard lesson. When the time comes, he wants to see what Doflamingo and Judge have to say. I hope Lu En, this kid, won't let me down. North Blue, Mushroom Town. The port was devastated, and the ground was riddled with holes. The artillery fire was raging. The entire port was almost sunk by the artillery fire. The ground was cracked, leaving countless cracks like spider webs, densely packed. Screams rang out one after another. The sound of fighting resounded through the sky. With the arrival of 5 pirate ships at the port coast, a full 2,000 pirates landed in Mushroom Town with great fanfare. A fierce confrontation and collision broke out between the two sides and the Marines stationed in Mushroom Town. Led by Diamante and Yangzi, they led a total of 2,000 pirates, of which 1,200 were fully armed clones with excellent combat skills. The other 800 pirates were from the pirate group under the Don Quixote family. They were very brutal and cruel, and the National 5 were also good. On the other side, led by Karen and Modson, the Marine had only more than 400 people, and about 1/3 of them were recruits who had just joined Marine. Whether it was the difference in numbers or the difference in individual strength between the two sides, Marine was obviously far inferior to the combined forces of the two families on the opposite side. So, as soon as the battle broke out, Marine was defeated. Being completely suppressed, Karen and Modson fought back. Karen faced Diamante, and Modson faced Yangji. The top leaders of both sides had a fierce confrontation. It was a pity. Karen was defeated by Diamante after all. Modson was also defeated by Yangzi in a nearly crushing manner. As the two were defeated, the remaining Marine was also defeated quickly. This was a one-sided battle. Cough cough. Karen coughed violently with his hands on the ground, spitting blood. His face turned pale, his right hand tightly grasped the samurai sword, and stared at Diamante with anger. Diamante walked over step by step with a saber in his hand, looking at Karen with indifference. At the same time he asked, "Didn't you say that there is an admiral's nephew in your Mushroom Town Marine branch? What? Where is he? Could it be that he saw that there were too many people on our side and was scared to find a place to hide? This admiral's nephew is really a discredit to the admiral. Afraid before the battle? Before, I thought that this admiral's nephew was so great, but now I see that he is just so-so." Hearing this, Karen angrily retorted, "You don't understand anything at all." Diamante laughed. "I don't understand. Well, you let that person stand up. What, is he afraid? Or is he afraid of us?" On the other side, Moderson, who was knocked to the ground, also looked over with anger. "Wait. You damn pirates. When Colonel Lu En returns, it will be the time for you to become prisoners." Yangzi walked to Diamante, looking bored and uninterested. He said, "The Marines here are too weak. I haven't even started to fight seriously, but I didn't expect them to be defeated. It seems that I overestimated them. Maybe I shouldn't have sent out 1,200 clone soldiers from the beginning. I really overestimated them. Maybe only 200 clone soldiers are needed to deal with them. Hearing this, Diamante nodded in agreement. Indeed, I shouldn't have mobilized 800 pirates to deal with this group of Marines. Maybe just the two of us are enough. Yangzi laughed. That's right. These Marines are really weak. I don't know where they got the courage to disrupt our arms deal. With the strength of this group of Marines, I really can't imagine it. How did they sabotage those 10 arms deals? Do they really have the strength to do so? In less than 10 minutes, the Marine was defeated miserably. The whole process was completely powerless. They were defeated by this group of pirates. Captured, including the 2 Marine officers, Karen and Modson, all the Marines who fought against the pirates were defeated without exception, fell to the ground, and were humiliated one by one, but could not resist. The battle was tragic. The Marine was defeated too easily. There was no hope at all, and they were defeated by the pirates on the opposite side. How should we deal with this group of Marines? Should we kill them all? Yangzi looked at Diamante and replied, of course. Diamante nodded after hearing the instructions of his young master. Are you sure? I'm not afraid. As a member of the Vinsmoke family, as long as I'm in North Blue, the Marine can't do anything to me. But you Don Quixote family are different. Your business is all over the Grand Line. If you offend the Marines completely, they will definitely launch a series of retaliatory strikes against your Don Quixote family's business. Yangzi said bluntly. He looks reckless, but he actually has a keen mind. The young master personally ordered me to kill all the Marines here. It may be because the Marines have done something that angered my young master recently. Diamante said. Okay, you decide. I'm not panicking anyway, so you can kill me if you want. Yangzi waved his hand. Listening to the exchange between the two, Karen, Moderson and all the defeated Marines felt a piercing coldness from the bottom of their hearts. Just as Diamante was about to take action, in vain, he glanced at the distant sea area beyond the port. At the end of the endless blue sea, a warship appeared faintly and was approaching the direction of Mushroom Town. Warship? Diamante's eyes flashed. Yangzi came to his side and looked in the direction of his gaze. Sure enough, he saw a warship approaching. But, there was only one warship. Only one warship? Boring. I thought it was the reinforcements sent by the Marines. Unexpectedly, only one warship arrived as reinforcement. Yangzi lacked interest. With a total of 2,000 people on their side, if only one warship came to reinforce, it was obviously not enough to shake the alliance between the two families. Unlike Diamante and Yangji, whether it was Karen, Moderson, or the other defeated Marines. When they saw the warship coming from the distant sea, they all showed expressions full of excitement, and relief. Here it comes. Colonel Lu En is back. We are saved. These damn pirates should also feel the powerlessness and despair that dominates their body and mind. Next, it's their turn to suffer. The Marines shouted excitedly. Karen and Modson clenched their fists. Are they not sick? Yangji looked strange and talked to Diamante. Just a warship came to reinforce, but it can give them such great confidence. Even let them think that a warship alone is enough to fight against our two leader people? Diamante frowned. He said, I heard from them that the person in charge of the warship that came to reinforce is named Lu En. Is he the nephew of Admiral Kizaru? It seems that the main person we are waiting for has finally appeared. The two walked side by side and came to the edge of the harbor coast. They quietly looked at the medium-sized warship approaching in front of them. Behind them, 2,000 pirates were ready for battle, fierce and fierce. On the opposite side, there was only one medium-sized warship. At this time, on the warship, on the deck, Bart looked at the battlefield left by the fierce battle that had already broken out in the harbor. Seeing the miserable situation of all the Marines, his face was ugly and he was very angry. And when he saw that even the two Marine officers, Karen and Moderson, were pinned to the ground and unable to move, Bart and the Marines around him were furious. Colonel. They all looked at Lu En, waiting for his order. There are less than 20 minutes left, and the regiment will arrive at 6 o'clock, 17. Lu En glanced at the time and a smile appeared on his face. There is plenty of time, more than enough, in order to get off work on time. Lu En decided to resolve everything in front of him within 20 minutes. At this time, the port of Mushroom Town was completely destroyed and riddled with holes. All the Marines were defeated and taken prisoner, and the battle was extremely tragic. Pull the ship over. As Lu En gave the order. Finally, the warship successfully arrived at the ruined port of Mushroom Town. At the same time, 2,000 pirates led by Diamante and Yangzi had already come in a fierce manner and surrounded the port area with great momentum. Chapter 45. Conqueror's explosion. Shocking the whole audience. First order on 4/10. Mushroom Town port. The ground was cracked, and cracks were all over the port. The wreckage left by the bombardment was mixed with a pungent smell of smoke. Diamante and Yangzi led 2,000 pirates to surround the entire port. The atmosphere was depressing. Colonel Karen, do you think Colonel Lu En can win? Moderson was nervous, because his heart was uneasy. Although he had a certain understanding of Lu En's strong strength, the number of enemies he faced at this time was too large, and there were 2,000 pirates coming fiercely. He was worried that even a strong Colonel Lu En could not resist the human wave tactics. Don't worry. Unlike Moderson's nervousness, Karen looked relaxed. He looked in awe at the young figure standing on the deck of the warship on the coast. He knew Lu En better than Moderson. In a moment, you will know why I have such blind trust in Colonel Lu En. No matter how many people there are, they are nothing in front of Colonel Lu En. Don't say there are only 2,000 people. Even if they are 10 times more, 20,000 or even 200,000 people surround the entire port. With Colonel Lu En's strength, it will only take a moment to deal with them. Have you forgotten? I told you before. Colonel Lu En is a monster with the potential of the Lord. He is the real monster of this Yuetian Sea. A natural king. Hearing this, Moderson's tense mood eased a little. But he still couldn't help feeling nervous. The siege launched by 2,000 pirates was too oppressive. Moreover, Diamante, one of the highest cadres of the Don Quixote family, and Yangzi, the youngest son of the Vinsmoke family. After the fight just now, these two people are obviously not ordinary people, but real strong men. It is normal for him to worry that Lu En can't compete with these pirates. These people can't understand the horror of Colonel Lu En at all. Just wait and see. Karen looked at the backs of Diamante and Yangzi, sneering. Don't think they have the upper hand now. But in fact, once Colonel Lu En makes a move, then the situation on the scene will immediately usher in a huge reversal. When the time comes, it will be their turn to sweat profusely. Now, let them be arrogant for a while. Warship, on the deck. Rows of Marines stood around Bart. Each Marine had an angry look on his face, staring at the more than 2,000 pirates who surrounded the port. Nervous, uneasy, fear, none of these emotions appeared on the Marines on the warship. Because, they knew very well what a powerful and terrifying existence the boy they followed was. A monster so powerful that he split the entire island with just one knife. With such a monster in charge, they certainly wouldn't feel nervous or uneasy. In their opinion, the ones who should be feeling uneasy are the aggressive pirates in front of them. Are you Admiral Kizaru's nephew? Diamante looked at Lu En on the deck and spoke lightly. Lu En did not respond. Diamante continued to talk. The young master personally ordered me to greet Admiral Kizaru's nephew. He also said something by the way. Anyone who destroys our Don Quixote family's business, no matter who he is, what kind of background and backing he has, must pay a painful price. On the side, Yangzi led 1,200 clone soldiers fully armed with modern technology. He said with disdain, Admiral's nephew. So what? In North Blue, even if the Marine Admiral comes in person, he has to give way to our Vinsmoke family. Don't even mention the Marine Admiral. Even if a member of the world government comes to North Blue, he has to keep a low profile. The real ruler of North Blue has always been our Vinsmoke family, not the so-called world government. Seeing the arrogant appearance of the two heads from the two families, Bart, who was standing behind Lu En, couldn't help but mourn for the two people for 3 minutes. You don't know what kind of monster you are facing. In an instant, Lu En jumped off the deck of the warship. His feet landed steadily, arrived at the ruined harbor coast of Mushroom Town. Bart and other Marines did not get Lu En's order, so they did not act rashly and stayed on the deck of the warship. They knew. Facing the 2,000 pirates in front of them, if they acted rashly, they would not bring any help to Lu En. Instead, they would add a series of troubles to the other party and become exhausted. As for whether Lu En could deal with this group of pirates alone, in this regard, whether it was Bart or other Marines on the warship, they never doubted Lu En's ability. Just 2,000 pirates. Even if the number was 10 times, it would be a small scene. It doesn't matter. Colonel Lu En will take action. Faced with the joint efforts of our two families, how should you deal with it? As the nephew of the Admiral, your strength should not be simple, right? It's a pity that under the human wave tactics, how much of your strength can you exert? For the encirclement we have launched, how can you break the situation? How can you rescue a group of captured sea tails? How about this? You take the initiative to apologize to our two families on behalf of the Marine. In this way, maybe I can still spare you. After all, unless it is absolutely necessary, we really don't want to offend a Marine Admiral for no reason. Diamante thought that he had given sincere advice from the bottom of his heart. For the advice given by Diamante, Yangzi expressed high approval. I agree. After a pause, he first glanced at the 1,200 clone soldiers behind him, and then fixed his eyes on Lu En again, without concealing his arrogant attitude. He said earnestly, the power of one person is limited after all. You don't think that you can overthrow 2,000 of us by yourself, right? Not to mention you. Even if the Marine Admiral comes in person, it is not an easy task to overthrow 2,000 of us. Until now, I still feel that I have overestimated you Marines. I didn't expect that you Marines are so vulnerable. If I had known this would happen, I would have sent out at most 200 clone soldiers. Diamante and Yangzi sang in unison, behind them. The group of pirates laughed wildly. Strength in numbers? Not necessarily. Lu En smiled faintly. There are still 10 minutes before the end of get off work. There is no need to be too anxious. It won't take a few minutes to deal with the group of pirates in front of him. He was not in a hurry at all. In fact, you said something right just now. To deal with you, I am enough, Lu En said. Arrogant. Diamante snorted. Yangzi looked at him with a bad look. Why don't you give it a try? I want to see how you can overthrow more than 2,000 of us by yourself. If you can't do it, kneel down and apologize. I am too lazy to waste too much time with these people. Lu En felt boring. Forget it. It's better to get rid of you as soon as possible and clock out early. With the thought, Lu En's eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp brilliance. And then, a faint momentum slowly began to brew from his body. Buzz. Buzz. The space around Lu En's body seemed to be slightly creeping, twisting, and trembling. In an instant, this brewing momentum suddenly burst out. It spreads and releases from the body. Like a surging wave, it covers the whole area. Boom. The earth-shaking momentum bursts out from Lu En's body. The explosion of the overwhelming momentum is like a stormy sea. It is unstoppable, surging. At first, this momentum is like a gurgling stream. But in a blink of an eye, this momentum has evolved into a majestic wave that can overturn the river and the sea, covering the whole sky and earth, destroying everything. This invisible and invisible aura, with Lu En's body as the center point, spreads rapidly in all directions in a circle. The extremely terrifying aura pressure instantly enveloped the whole place. Under the pressure of this momentum, even the space is slightly distorted, and it seems as if it will collapse at any time. The void collapses and the space is annihilated. This momentum is so terrible that it is outrageous. There is no doubt, this is the Conqueror's Haki that erupted from Lu En's body. The earth-shaking Conqueror's Haki has quickly spread to the area of more than 2,000 pirates led by Diamante and Yangzi. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, the first pirates to come into contact with this Conqueror's Haki had their faces instantly frozen, their pupils turned white, their mouths foamed, and their minds were scattered. Their spirits and consciousness were directly shattered, and they lost control of their limbs. Thump. 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 One after another, the pirates' limbs were weak, their mouths foamed, their eyes rolled white, and they were hit by the mental shock caused by Conqueror's Haki, and their bodies fell to the side uncontrollably. This is the destruction from the mental level, invisible and intangible. Unstoppable. This is an attack that completely surpasses the physical level. The weak-willed pirates are all inevitably crushed and their spirits and consciousness are instantly crushed. The body that lost consciousness naturally lost control and fell heavily to the ground, completely passed out. Even the clone soldiers mass-produced by the Vinsmoke family were inevitably stunned by the overwhelming Conqueror's Haki at this moment. Pirates fell to the ground one after another. Once they fell, a large group of them fell immediately. A group of pirates fell down like a tidal wave. Not just one or two, but a group. A large group of pirates fell down at once, and the scene was naturally extremely shocking and brought an extremely strong visual impact. Please give flowers. So, it was only a short time of a few breaths. I saw. The 2,000 people standing behind Diamante and Yangzi, without exception, all fell down completely. All the pirates were unconscious and completely lying dead. They were crooked. Chaos. At the scene, only Diamante and Yangji were still standing, able to maintain a clear mind within the range of the shocking Conqueror's Haki. At this point, the advantage and disadvantage situation originally caused by the huge difference in the number of people on both sides. But in an instant, it ushered in a major reversal. Silence. The atmosphere on the scene became particularly dead silent. The whole audience was silent. Diamante stayed where he was, motionless, his whole body stiff, his eyes were wide open, and his eyebrows were filled with horror, shock, horror, and disbelief. Beside him, Yangji's expression was not much better. Both of them were shocked without exception. Yangji's throat was dry. He turned around and stared blankly at the large number of clone soldiers who fell behind him. His eyes were wide open and he was dumbfounded. For a moment, he was stuttering and incoherent. He was no longer as arrogant and confident as before. What's going on? What happened? Yangzi asked Diamante, who was also dumbfounded, with a trembling voice. 2,000 people were killed in an instant without exception. If these 2,000 people fell to the ground and still kept breathing, I'm afraid people would mistakenly think that these 2,000 people had all become cold corpses. The method of killing 2,000 people in an instant in one encounter was something Yangzi had never seen before. That's why. He was completely confused at this moment, his whole head was dizzy, his mind was blank, and the whole person was completely dominated by the thick fear of the unknown. Everyone was killed in seconds. What kind of trick was this? Was it him? That boy who looked no more than 15 or 16 years old? How could he have such a terrifying and strange trick? Could it be some kind of special devil fruit? The more Yangzi thought about it, the more frightened he became. Gurgle, Diamante couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He slowly woke up from the shock. When he heard what Yangzi said, he subconsciously blurted out to deny the other party's guess. No. This is not a devil fruit. Compared to Yangzi, who was hiding in North Blue as a local tyrant, Diamante, a pirate from New World Dressrosa, naturally knew more about the power that killed these 2,000 people in seconds. It was precisely because he knew too much that Diamante's inner shock was no less than Yangji's. Bah, Conqueror's Haki. This is the Conqueror's Haki that is 1 in a million. Diamante looked at the figure of the young man in front of him with horror and shock. His face turned pale and his whole body couldn't help but tremble slightly. The young master of their Don Quixote family, Doflamingo, is the owner of the Conqueror's Haki. So, he can be sure that this is the Conqueror's Haki. Conquerors? After getting Diamante's response, Yangzi seemed to be suddenly enlightened and immediately figured out the truth of what happened just now. Born in the Vinsmoke family, Yangzi naturally couldn't be a fool who knew nothing. Haki, the most special power of the sea, of course, he has a deep understanding. Among them, although Yangzi has never seen the most special Conqueror's Haki among Conqueror's Haki, he has more or less known and understood it. So after hearing Diamante's response, Yangzi was able to react immediately and realize the truth. This? How is it possible? You mean, this boy, who is only 15 or 16 years old, is the owner of Conqueror's Haki? A monster with the potential to be a king? A natural king? The silent atmosphere was broken by Yangzi's successive voice loss. The shock in his heart was infinitely magnified. The answer from Diamante was like a stone that caused 1,000 waves. While Yangzi suddenly realized it, his heart was also shaken more and more, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. A monster who controls Conqueror's Haki at the age of only 15 or 16. Hiss. Yangzi couldn't help but take a breath when he thought of it. The enemy they were facing at this moment was actually a monster of this level, which made Yangzi pale, sweating and uneasy. As the 2,000 people were killed instantly, only Diamante and Yangzi were left at the scene, and the situation immediately reversed. It was their turn to be surrounded by Marine. However, in comparison, compared to the group that surrounded the Marine, in fact, what shocked, frightened and daunted them the most was the boy who was only 15 or 16 years old standing in front of them. The oppression brought to them by this monster was far greater than that of the group of Marines who surrounded them by thousands of times.